The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields bend spacetime in predictable ways. Subspace allows faster-than-light communication through mathematical precision. The Bajoran wormhole, stable for 3 years, connected the Alpha Quadrant to the Gamma Quadrant with reliable consistency. But what happens when something tears through the fabric of reality itself? Something that doesn't belong, carrying technology that defies every principle of this universe's physics. The Dominion had launched their largest offensive yet. Jem'Hadar attack ships poured through the wormhole in unprecedented numbers, their polaron beams carving through the Allied fleet's shields. On Deep Space Nine's Operations Center, Captain Benjamin Sisko watched the tactical display with growing concern as another Federation starship's icon blinked out of existence. Defiant reports heavy casualties, Kira Nerys said from Tactical, her voice tight. The Klingon task force is breaking formation, they're being overwhelmed. Sisko's jaw clenched. Tell them to fall back to. The operations center's lights flickered. Every console sparked simultaneously. Chief O'Brien's station erupted in a shower of sparks as he dove backward. What the hell? The main view screen went white. Not the white of a weapon's impact or shield overload. Pure, searing white that filled every screen, every display, every window facing the wormhole. Sisko raised his hand against the glare, squinting as his eyes adjusted. Report. Captain, the wormhole, it's destabilizing. Daxa's hands flew across her science console, her trill spots darkening as she concentrated. I'm reading a massive subspace rupture. The Verteron nodes are collapsing, but there's something else, some kind of energy signature I've never seen before. It's not matching any known warp field configuration. The white light pulsed once, twice, then something emerged. It was massive. Easily 3 times the size of a Galaxy-class starship, dagger-shaped and gray, its hull bristling with weapons emplacements that seemed simultaneously primitive and terrifyingly advanced. The ship lurched as it cleared the wormhole, trailing plasma and debris. Entire sections of its hull were scorched black, atmosphere venting from a dozen breaches. Behind it, the wormhole convulsed like a living thing before snapping shut with a flash that sent shockwaves rippling through space. The Dominion fleet stopped firing. The Allied fleet held position. Everyone stared at the dying warship that had just torn its way into their universe. Scan it, Sisko ordered quietly. Full spectrum analysis. O'Brien was already working, his fingers dancing across the repaired console. I'm reading. Captain, this doesn't make sense. The power systems are completely foreign. Not Federation, not Klingon, not Romulan, not Borg. The energy signatures are off every scale I know. It's like someone built a starship using completely different laws of physics. Life signs. Thousands. Humanoid, but the bio signs are strange. Some kind of filtering technology is interfering with detailed scans. O'Brien paused, his Irish accent thickening with confusion. Captain, there are what look like small fighter craft inside that ship. Dozens of them. Single-pilot designs without warp capability. Who builds fighters that can't go to warp? Kira's tactical board lit up. The Dominion fleet is targeting the new contact. Hail them, Sisko said immediately. Tell them to stand down. That ship is disabled, it's not a threat. But the Jem'Hadar didn't respond to reason. They never did. 3 attack ships broke formation, accelerating toward the wounded giant. On the mysterious vessel, something stirred. Turrets rotated with mechanical precision. Weapon ports that had seemed dead suddenly glowed with green energy. The first Jem'Hadar ship fired its polaron beams. The shot splashed against invisible barriers, shields, but not like any shields O'Brien had ever seen. They shimmered green instead of the standard blue-white of deflector technology. The response was devastating. Emerald energy lanced out from the dagger ship's turrets. Not phasers. Not disruptors. Something else entirely, coherent light that moved slower than energy weapons should, visible to the naked eye as it crossed the distance. When it struck the Jem'Hadar ship, the effect was catastrophic. The hull didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, vaporized in sections as the green beams carved through armor, shields, and hull plating like they weren't there. 2 more shots. 2 more Jem'Hadar ships gone. The Dominion fleet retreated back toward the wormhole's last known position. The Allied fleet maintained distance, weapons ready but not firing. The dagger ship's engines flickered, died, then reignited with a sputter. It was limping, barely maintaining position. Atmosphere continued to vent from hull breaches. But its weapons remained active, tracking targets with mathematical precision. "They're hailing us," Dax said, surprise evident in her voice. "Audio only." Sisko straightened. On screen. The voice that emerged was male, calm, with an accent that sounded almost human but carried undertones of something else, a slight reverberation, perfectly controlled articulation. "I am Grand Admiral Thrawn of the Imperial Navy. My vessel has suffered critical damage during an unexpected transition into your spatial region. I request immediate parley under whatever diplomatic protocols govern this conflict zone. I am prepared to defend my ship, but prefer negotiation to unnecessary casualties." Kira leaned toward Sisko. "Imperial Navy? There's no Empire in any of our databases with that designation." O'Brien was shaking his head. "Captain, that ship is dying. Life support is failing in multiple sections. Whatever happened when they came through that wormhole, it tore them apart. They've got maybe 6 hours before total systems failure." Sisko made his decision. "This is Captain Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine, United Federation of Planets. Grand Admiral, you've emerged in the middle of a war zone. We're willing to offer humanitarian assistance, but I need to know. What empire do you represent, and what were your intentions in entering Bajoran space?" A pause. Then, "Captain Sisko. I represent an empire that, I suspect, exists far beyond your known territories. As for intentions, I had none. My ship was caught in what you might call a catastrophic navigational anomaly. We are currently stranded in your region of space with severely damaged propulsion systems. I propose a meeting. Face to face. I believe we have much to discuss, and very little time in which to discuss it." Sisko glanced at his senior staff. Kira's expression was skeptical. Dax looked intrigued. O'Brien worried. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. "Stand by, Grand Admiral," Sisko said. "We'll transport you and a small delegation to Deep Space Nine. But understand. You and your crew are now guests of the Federation. Your weapons will remain powered down, and your ship will maintain its current position under guard by our fleet. Agreed?" Another pause. When Thrawn spoke again, there was something that might have been amusement in his voice. "Agreed, Captain. I look forward to our conversation. And Captain, I suggest you examine the artwork in your station's promenade before we meet. Art reveals much about a culture's strategic thinking. It will help you understand what I am about to propose." The channel closed. Sisko stood there, staring at the wounded warship floating in Bajoran space. Behind him, the wormhole's absence felt like a missing tooth, a gap where something vital had been. The Dominion War had just become infinitely more complicated. And somewhere on that alien vessel, a tactical genius from another galaxy was already planning his next move. The transporter pad shimmered, and Benjamin Sisko got his first look at Grand Admiral Thrawn. The man, if he was a man, stood with military precision, hands clasped behind his back. His skin was blue. Not the light blue of an Andorian or Balian, but a deep, striking cobalt that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. His eyes were pure red, glowing faintly in the station's lighting, without visible pupils. He wore a crisp white uniform with gold epaulets and rank insignia that spoke of authority earned through competence rather than birth. Two beings flanked him. One humanoid in black armor carrying no visible weapons, another in a gray uniform with a data pad. Odo stepped forward from his position near the transporter controls, his shapeshifter's instincts immediately assessing threat levels. "Captain, security sweep is clean. No weapons detected." Thrawn inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the changeling with interest. "A wise precaution, Constable. Though I should note that weapons are tools. The mind that wields them determines their true danger." His voice was exactly as it had sounded over communications. Cultured, measured, with an accent that suggested dozens of languages learned and mastered. He stepped off the transporter pad with the controlled grace of someone accustomed to combat readiness at all times. Sisko extended his hand. "Grand Admiral Thrawn. Welcome to Deep Space Nine." Thrawn studied the gesture for precisely 1 second before accepting the handshake. His grip was firm, controlled. "Captain Sisko. Your station's architecture is fascinating, Cardassian design with Federation modifications. The original builders valued intimidation and surveillance. Your improvements prioritize comfort and community. The contrast suggests your Federation defeated the Cardassians ideologically rather than through pure military superiority." Kira bristled. "The Cardassians occupied Bajorans for 50 years. We drove them out." Those red eyes turned to her, and Sisko saw Thrawn's expression shift microscopically, cataloging, analyzing. "Major Kira Nerys, I presume. Bajoran. Former resistance fighter, current Starfleet liaison. You carry yourself like someone who learned warfare through necessity rather than training. Guerrilla tactics. Improvisation. You defeated a superior force through attrition and moral conviction." He paused. "Remarkable." Kira's hand moved closer to her phaser. "How do you know who I am?" "I don't." Thrawn's tone remained calm. "I observe. Your uniform differs slightly from Captain Sisko's, Bajoran militia, integrated with Starfleet structure. Your body language suggests someone who trusts their instincts over protocol. The way you position yourself near the exit, maintaining clear sight lines, textbook resistance training. Am I incorrect?" "You're not," Sisko said, cutting off Kira's response. "But right now, Grand Admiral, I need answers more than demonstrations of tactical analysis. Your ship appeared out of a collapsing wormhole in the middle of a war zone. Jem'Hadar vessels were destroyed by weapons we don't recognize. And you claim to represent an empire we've never encountered. Start explaining." Thrawn nodded once, as if approving of Sisko's directness. "Captain, may we sit? What I have to tell you will take time, and my ship's reactor core is currently operating at 30% efficiency. I prefer not to waste either resource." Minutes later, they sat in Deep Space Nine's wardroom. Thrawn had politely declined refreshments, instead producing a small holographic projector from his aide's datapad. The device activated, displaying a star map that meant absolutely nothing to anyone present. "This is the galaxy I come from," Thrawn began. "The empire I serve controls a significant portion of its inhabited systems, approximately 1.5 million worlds under direct governance, with thousands more in protectorate status. We possess faster-than-light travel through what we call hyperspace, a dimension parallel to yours but fundamentally different from your warp-based propulsion." Dax leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. "That would explain why your ship's power systems don't match anything in our databases. You're not just from another region of space, you're from another universe entirely." "Correct, Commander. When my star destroyer, the Chimaera, engaged a Rebel Alliance fleet near a spatial anomaly, we were caught in an unexpected dimensional collapse. Our hyperdrive attempted to compensate, but instead of entering hyperspace, we were pulled through what you call a wormhole into your reality. Thrawn's fingers moved across the projector, showing damaged schematics. The transition was catastrophic. Our hyperdrive is destroyed. Primary weapon systems are degraded. Life support is failing in 40% of the ship. And most critically, we cannot return home. Silence filled the wardroom. O'Brien broke it first. Can't return. Ever. The wormhole has collapsed. Even if we could repair our systems, hyperspace does not exist in your universe. Your warp drive operates on principles incompatible with our technology. We are, in the most literal sense, stranded. Thrawn met each person's eyes in turn. 6,000 crew members, Captain Sisko. Soldiers, engineers, pilots. All of them now dependent on your mercy. Sisko felt the weight of command settle heavier on his shoulders. 6,000 lives. An entire starship crew from another reality, trapped in the middle of the Dominion War. What do you want from us? Initially, survival. My crew requires medical assistance, particularly for radiation exposure from the wormhole transition. We need repair facilities and raw materials to stabilize the Chimaera's systems. In exchange, I offer something I suspect you need desperately, tactical expertise. Kira laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think we need military advice from someone who just arrived? Thrawn's expression didn't change. Major, before Captain Sisko transported me aboard, I took the liberty of monitoring your communications frequencies. Your Dominion War has been ongoing for approximately 1 year. You face an enemy from the Gamma Quadrant, shapeshifters called Founders who control genetically engineered soldiers and have allied with the Cardassian Union. The Federation, Klingon Empire, and Romulan Star Empire have formed a temporary alliance, but coordination between your forces is inefficient. The Dominion holds significant territory in the Alpha Quadrant, and you are losing. Sisko's expression hardened. That's classified information. All warfare is based on deception, Captain. But I am not your enemy. I am a military strategist without a war, stranded in a universe where a very real conflict threatens billions of lives. My empire taught me that survival requires adaptation. So I adapt. Thrawn leaned forward slightly. I studied your comm traffic during my 4 hours of observation. I analyzed tactical reports, casualty figures, fleet movements. And I identified 17 critical mistakes in your defensive strategy around this station alone. 17. O'Brien sounded offended. Would you like me to list them, Chief? Or would you prefer I demonstrate by predicting the Dominion's next move? Thrawn's red eyes gleamed. Within the next 26 hours, a Jem'Hadar strike force will attempt to retake Deep Space Nine using a three-pronged assault. They will target your shield generators first, then deploy boarding parties through your lower docking pylons while their main fleet engages your defenses from the Bajoran moon's gravitational shadow. They will fail, but you will lose at least 2 starships and suffer 300 casualties. Dax checked her tactical database, running probability algorithms. Her spots paled slightly. Captain, his analysis matches the tactical profile we've been developing for the last week. The Jem'Hadar have been probing our defenses in exactly the pattern he's describing. How? Sisko demanded. Art, Captain. Thrawn produced another device, displaying images that made everyone in the room stiffen. Bajoran religious paintings. Cardassian propaganda sculptures. Federation historical archives. All downloaded from DS9's cultural database during their brief communication window. Every species reveals their psychology through artistic expression. The Bajorans create art focused on spiritual enlightenment and perseverance through suffering, a culture that values faith over pragmatism. Useful for predicting resilience, less useful for tactical flexibility. The Cardassians create art celebrating order and dominance. They value hierarchy and will sacrifice individual initiative for collective authority. The Federation, he paused, studying a painting of the USS Enterprise. Your art celebrates exploration, diversity, cooperation. You value individual rights and diplomatic solutions. Noble. But in warfare, nobility is a liability unless tempered with strategic ruthlessness. You're saying we're too soft, Kira said flatly. I'm saying you fight with one hand tied behind your back by principles that your enemy does not share. The Founders do not value individual life. The Jem'Hadar are bred to die. Your prime directive prevents you from using biological warfare, cultural manipulation, or preemptive strikes that might prevent greater casualties. You fight defensively when aggressive action would save lives. Thrawn stood, walking to the window overlooking the Bajoran system. Captain Sisko, you are losing this war not because you lack courage or technology, but because you refuse to think like your enemy. I can teach you how. If you are willing to learn. Sisko exchanged glances with his senior staff. Dax looked intrigued but cautious. O'Brien was skeptical. Kira appeared ready to throw the Grand Admiral out an airlock. Odo simply watched, his security instincts analyzing every micro-expression. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Sisko asked. Thrawn turned from the window. Purpose, Captain. I serve my Emperor to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. That galaxy is now unreachable. But chaos exists here as well. The Dominion represents existential tyranny, shapeshifters who view all solids as inferior, who wage war through deception and genetic slavery. They must be stopped. And I am very good at stopping such threats. You want us to trust you based on analysis of our artwork and bold predictions? Sisko shook his head. Grand Admiral, for all I know, you could be working with the Dominion. Maybe this whole arrival was staged. A reasonable suspicion. How do I prove my sincerity? Thrawn considered for exactly 3 seconds. Allow me to coordinate the defense when the Jem'Hadar attack tomorrow. Give me access to your tactical systems and fleet deployments. If I fail, you lose nothing. You were expecting the attack regardless. If I succeed, you gain a strategic advisor who can help you win this war. And if you use that access to sabotage our defenses, then you will have me executed, and my crew will die when the Chimaera loses life support in 6 days. Thrawn's voice remained utterly calm. Captain, I am offering you a wager. My life and the lives of my crew against your willingness to trust someone who thinks differently than you do. In my experience, the side that adapts fastest wins wars. Will you adapt? Sisko stood, walking to the window to stand beside this blue-skinned tactical genius from another reality. Below, the Bajoran system stretched out, a civilization still recovering from occupation, now threatened by an even greater tyranny. Behind them, his crew waited for orders. Beyond the station, a damaged Star Destroyer full of stranded soldiers represented either a desperate risk or an unprecedented opportunity. Dax, coordinate with the Grand Admiral's engineers to stabilize their ship systems. O'Brien, analyze their technology, carefully. Odo, assign security to monitor their crew at all times. Sisko turned to face Thrawn directly. You'll get your chance, Grand Admiral. But understand, if you betray us, if you endanger this station or the Bajoran people, I will personally make sure you regret ever entering our universe. Thrawn smiled. It was a slight expression, controlled and calculated. I would expect nothing less, Captain. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should examine your defensive perimeter before the Dominion arrives. Art analysis is enlightening, but there is no substitute for direct observation. As Thrawn left with his aide, Odo moved closer to Sisko. Captain, I don't trust him. Neither do I, Sisko admitted. But if he's half as good as he claims, we might finally have a chance to turn this war around. And if he's lying, then we'll find out tomorrow, Kira finished. When the Jem'Hadar attack exactly as he predicted. Sisko nodded, watching the Grand Admiral disappear down the corridor. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was planning their next move. And now, so was Thrawn. The question was, which side would adapt faster? Thrawn stood alone in Deep Space Nine's promenade at 0300 hours, studying a Bajoran tapestry with the intensity most people reserved for tactical displays. The station's commercial district was nearly empty, a few late-night gamblers stumbling out of quarks, a Bajoran monk in quiet meditation near the temple entrance. The Grand Admiral had dismissed his aide an hour ago, preferring solitude for his analysis. Behind a support column, Odo watched. The changeling had been following Thrawn since the meeting ended 6 hours ago. The alien admiral had toured the docking ring, examined the shield generators, and reviewed helm control schematics with unsettling efficiency. Now he stood before artwork, motionless except for his eyes tracking details invisible to others. "You may approach, Constable," Thrawn said without turning. "Your liquid form leaves distinctive thermal patterns on metal surfaces. Quite elegant, actually." Odo materialized fully, abandoning pretense. "Most people can't detect me. Most people don't survive long in Imperial service." Thrawn gestured to the tapestry, a complex weaving depicting the prophets guiding Bajoran ships through turbulent space. This piece was created during the occupation. Notice the composition. The prophets are rendered in gold thread, oversized and dominant. The Bajoran vessels are small, almost insignificant. Yet the ships are moving toward the prophets, not away from oppression. The artist reveals something critical about Bajoran psychology. Which is, they don't view themselves as victims, they view themselves as chosen. The Cardassian occupation wasn't senseless suffering but a trial that proved their worthiness to the prophets. This makes them simultaneously resilient and inflexible. They will endure tremendous hardship, but they resist pragmatic compromises that seem to contradict divine purpose. Thrawn finally looked at Odo. "Tell me, Constable. Do you believe in the prophets?" "I believe in order and justice," Odo replied carefully. "The prophets are Bayer's concern, not mine." A diplomatic answer from someone who values truth. "Interesting." Thrawn moved to another piece, a Cardassian sculpture of angular, aggressive forms. "You're changeling. One of the founders the Dominion serves. Yet you enforce Federation law on a Bajoran station. Why?" Odo stiffened. "I'm nothing like the founders." "No, you're not. The founders I've read about view solids as inferior, chaos to be controlled. You've chosen to live among solids, to impose order through their legal frameworks rather than authoritarian force. You're a dissident." Thrawn's red eyes studied Odo with unnerving focus. "That makes you either a traitor to your people or proof that even the founders' rigid philosophy can produce variation. Which do you prefer?" "I prefer you answer my questions," Odo said tersely. "What are you really doing here, Thrawn? Studying art at 3 in the morning? Learning how to save your station?" Thrawn activated his datapad, displaying tactical projections. "The Jem'Hadar attack will come from 3 vectors, as I told Captain Sisko. But there's a 4th element I didn't mention, a suicide run designed to penetrate your reactor core. 20 Jem'Hadar soldiers willing to die to cripple Deep Space Nine permanently. They'll use the attack as cover to beam directly into your lower engineering sections during the chaos." Odo's expression hardened. "How do you know this?" "Because it's what I would do. Your shields are strong, but during combat, you'll need to lower them intermittently to allow friendly ships to dock for repairs. That creates windows, 3 to 5 second gaps. The Jem'Hadar are bred for suicide tactics. They'll recognize the same vulnerability." Thrawn zoomed in on DS-9's lower docking ring. "Here. Junction 14 Alpha. It's the least defended access point to your primary systems because you assume your shields prevent boarding. They do. Until you have to drop them to save a dying Allied vessel. You're predicting they'll exploit our compassion. I'm predicting they'll exploit predictable behavior. Compassion is simply one variable. Thrawn closed the data pad. Station 20 security personnel at Junction 14 Alpha before the attack. Arm them with wide dispersal phaser rifles. When the Jem'Hadar beam in, don't attempt capture, kill them immediately. They carry isogenic explosives powerful enough to breach your reactor shielding. Odo absorbed this, his features rippling slightly, a tell that Thrawn catalogued mentally. If you're wrong, I'll have diverted resources from actual defensive positions. If I'm wrong, Constable, you'll have 20 board security officers who spent several hours guarding an empty corridor. If I'm right, you'll have saved 6,000 lives. Thrawn turned back to the Cardassian sculpture. Art reveals truth, but survival requires acting on that truth. Will you? Before Odo could respond, a Ferengi in garish clothing emerged from the bar, spotted Thrawn, and approached with the calculated enthusiasm of someone smelling profit. Well, well. The mysterious Grand Admiral. Quark, proprietor of the finest establishment on DS9. Can I interest you in a drink? First one's free for new customers. Thrawn assessed Quark with the same analytical precision he'd applied to artwork. Ferengi. Species driven by acquisition and profit. Your rules of acquisition dictate behavior patterns designed to maximize material gain while minimizing risk. Fascinating evolutionary adaptation, you've survived as a culture not through military strength but through economic necessity to all sides. Quark's lobes twitched. I have no idea what you just said, but you're clearly educated. Educated customers spend more. What'll it be? Information, Thrawn said. I'll purchase 1 hour of your time. 5 bars of gold-pressed latinum. Quark's eyes widened. I don't suppose you have latinum from, wherever you're from. Thrawn produced a small metallic ingot from his uniform. Imperial credits. Pure orodium. Worth significantly more than latinum in my galaxy. I suspect your replicators can verify its molecular composition and value. 30 minutes later, they sat in Quark's private office. The Ferengi had indeed verified the orodium's worth, nearly 50 bars of latinum equivalent. Now he leaned forward, greed warring with curiosity. So what does a Grand Admiral want to know that's worth this much? Everything. Who profits from this war? Which factions trade with the Dominion despite official hostilities? Where do weapons move outside official channels? Who on this station has contacts in Cardassian space? Thrawn's expression remained neutral. War creates economic opportunities. You're positioned at the nexus of multiple powers. You know things Starfleet doesn't. Quark hesitated. That kind of information could get me killed. Or make you indispensable. Thrawn placed another orodium ingot on the desk. The Federation fights according to rules. The Dominion fights to win. I fight to achieve objectives. Right now, my objective is defending this station. To do that, I need intelligence your official channels won't provide. You have 45 minutes remaining. Begin. Quark talked. He talked about Cardassian merchants who still maintained backdoor communications with Dominion territory. About Iridian traders who sold information to all sides. About a Bajoran colonel who'd been behaving strangely before disappearing 3 weeks ago. About energy weapon shipments that didn't match official manifests. About Romulan operatives who frequented the bar asking pointed questions about the wormhole. Thrawn absorbed it all, filing away details, constructing a network map of influences and hidden agendas that existed beneath DS9's official structure. By the time the hour concluded, he understood the station's invisible architecture as clearly as its physical layout. One final question, Thrawn said as he stood to leave. The Bajorans worship their prophets. The Federation values its principles. What do you value, Quark? The Ferengi didn't hesitate. Profit. Survival. And in that order, depending on the day. Honest. Refreshing. Thrawn headed for the door, then paused. When the Dominion attacks tomorrow, stay in your bar. Reinforce your storage room's structural integrity if possible. There will be debris from the lower docking ring. Specifically, a section of bulkhead weighing approximately 2,000 kilograms will detach during the battle. It will impact this establishment unless you're elsewhere. Quark's face paled. How can you possibly know that? Structural stress analysis combined with predicted weapons fire patterns. Basic engineering. Thrawn's tone suggested this was obvious. Consider it a bonus for your cooperation. Good evening, Quark. The Grand Admiral left, his white uniform stark against the promenade's dim lighting. Odo followed at a distance, observing as Thrawn made his way to the habitat ring, presumably to rest before the coming battle. But Thrawn didn't rest. He returned to the Chimaera, beaming aboard his damaged Star Destroyer where 6,000 Imperial crew members waited in deteriorating conditions. The ship's interior was a nightmare of exposed conduits, flickering lights, and the acrid smell of burnt insulation. Stormtroopers stood guard at key intersections despite exhaustion and radiation sickness. Officers coordinated repair efforts with whatever resources they'd salvaged. Commander Eli Vanto met him in what remained of the bridge. Admiral, status report. We've stabilized life support in primary sections, but we're losing ground in the aft compartments. Dr. Chan says we have 70 crew members with critical radiation exposure. The Federation offered medical assistance, but you declined because you don't trust them. Correct decision. Thrawn studied the tactical displays showing DS9's defensive perimeter. However, we must adapt. Contact Captain Sisko. Accept his medical personnel. Assign stormtrooper escorts, but allow them full access to our casualties. They need to see us as desperate, not threatening. Sir, that reveals our weaknesses. It reveals calculated vulnerabilities while demonstrating cooperative intent. There's a difference. Thrawn highlighted 3 points on the display. The Dominion will attack here, and here at 1,400 hours tomorrow. I've already warned Captain Sisko. When the battle begins, I want all functional turbolasers charged and ready. We'll provide covering fire from our position. Vanto's eyes widened. Sir, our reactors are barely stable. Firing main weapons could trigger a cascade failure. A 23% probability, yes. But if we don't demonstrate value to the Federation, they'll view us as refugees rather than assets. Refugees are tolerated. Assets are protected. Thrawn's red eyes gleamed in the emergency lighting. We have one opportunity to prove we belong in this universe, Commander. Tomorrow, when the Jem'Hadar attack, the Chimaera will show these people what Imperial engineering can accomplish even when crippled. And if the reactors fail? Then we die proving we were warriors, not beggars. Prepare the crew. Across space, on DS9, Sisko stood in ops reviewing Thrawn's tactical recommendations. Dax worked beside him, running probability simulations that kept validating the Grand Admiral's predictions. O'Brien had reinforced shield generators according to Thrawn's specifications. Kira had positioned defensive squadrons at coordinates he'd suggested. Odo had stationed security at Junction 14 Alpha. It's almost insulting how accurate he is, Kira muttered. Like we've been fumbling around for a year while he figures everything out in 6 hours. He's had a lifetime to perfect tactical analysis, Dax observed. And he's right about one thing, we do fight defensively. The Dominion accepts casualties we won't tolerate. That's an advantage for them. Sisko studied the Bajoran system on the main viewer. Somewhere out there, Jem'Hadar attack ships were preparing their assault. Thrawn had predicted their approach vectors, their timing, even their psychological tactics. If he was right, DS9 would survive. If he was positioning them for betrayal. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Worf announced from tactical. Incoming transmission. Romulan frequency. They're requesting permission to dock. Romulans? Now. Sisko's instincts prickled. What do they want? The answer came minutes later when a Romulan commander materialized in the wardroom, female, middle-aged, with the calculating expression of someone who'd survived decades in the Tal Shiar. Captain Sisko. I am Commander Karas of the Romulan Intelligence Bureau. I'm here to discuss your new associate. Grand Admiral Thrawn. Sisko gestured to a chair. What about him? We've been monitoring his communications since he arrived. His tactical analysis is extraordinary. His strategic thinking surpasses anything we've encountered. And his complete lack of loyalty to any existing power structure makes him either the most valuable asset or the most dangerous variable in this war. Karas leaned forward. The Romulan Senate wishes to extend an offer. Allow us to take custody of Thrawn and his ship. We'll repair the Chimaera, integrate his crew into our military structure, and in exchange, share his tactical expertise with the Allied forces. You want to recruit him. We want to control him, Karas corrected. A mind like that, unaligned and desperate, will choose whoever offers the best survival odds. Right now, that's you. Tomorrow, it might be us. Or the Dominion. Or some faction we haven't anticipated. Captain, you're a military commander. You understand that unpredictable assets are liabilities. Sisko stood, ending the meeting. Thrawn and his crew are under Federation protection. If they choose to work with the Romulans, that's their decision. But we're not handing anyone over like cargo. Karas smiled coldly. How noble. Remember that nobility when you're trying to predict which side Thrawn will choose when the stakes escalate. The Tal Shiar has spent decades analyzing art and culture for strategic advantage. Thrawn has perfected it. That makes him one of us, Captain. Not one of you. After she left, Sisko stood at the window, watching the Chimaera floating in the distance, wounded, dangerous, full of unknowns. Thrawn had proven his analytical genius. Tomorrow, he'd prove his loyalty. Or his treachery. The Dominion War had just become significantly more complicated. The attack came precisely at 1400 hours. Sisko stood in ops, watching the tactical display as 12 Jem'Hadar attack ships dropped out of warp at the exact coordinates Thrawn had predicted. 3 emerged from behind Bajor's largest moon, their polaron beams already charging. 4 more appeared along the ecliptic plane, angling for the shield generators. The remaining 5 held back, a reserve force position to exploit any breach. Shields up, Sisko ordered. All hands to battle stations. Launch the Defiant. Worf's voice came over the comm from the Defiant's bridge. Acknowledged. Engaging lead attack group. The battle unfolded exactly as Thrawn had described. The Jem'Hadar's first volley concentrated on DS9's upper pylon shield emitters, the station's most vulnerable structural point. Federation and Klingon ships moved to intercept, their phasers and disruptors cutting through space. 2 Jem'Hadar vessels exploded in the opening exchange, but 3 more pressed forward with suicidal determination. Dax monitored the engagement from sciences. Captain, they're using exactly the attack pattern Thrawn predicted. Concentrated fire on the shield generators, forcing us to divert power from. An explosion rocked the station. Sparks erupted from ops consoles as a polaron beam punched through the weakening shields. Shields down to 70%, O'Brien reported, fingers dancing across his engineering console. Compensating, but if they maintain this pressure, we'll have gaps within 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Exactly what Thrawn had calculated. Sisko opened a channel. Grand Admiral, your analysis is holding. Are you prepared to provide support? From the Chimaera, Thrawn's calm voice responded. Captain Sisko, we are ready. Recommend you drop shields in sectors 7 through 12 for exactly 4 seconds to allow the damaged USS SeaTac to dock. The Jem'Hadar will recognize this opportunity and attempt their boarding action at Junction 14 Alpha. Constable Odo's security team should be in position. Confirmed, Odo's voice cut in from the lower decks. We're ready. Sisko made the call. O'Brien, drop shields in sectors 7 through 12. 4 seconds. The SeaTac, trailing plasma and atmosphere, limped toward DS-9's docking port. The shields flickered down. The Nebula-class ship slipped through, emergency thrusters firing. And 20 Jem'Hadar soldiers materialized at Junction 14 Alpha. They appeared in a corridor that should have been empty, carrying cylindrical devices that Odo immediately recognized as explosives. The lead Jem'Hadar's eyes widened fractionally, surprise, the first emotion Odo had ever seen from their species, before 20 phaser rifles opened fire simultaneously. The Jem'Hadar tried to fight back, but Thrawn's positioning had been perfect. The security teams had overlapping fields of fire, cover at optimal angles, and the psychological advantage of preparation. In 15 seconds, all 20 Jem'Hadar were dead, their bodies dematerializing as Ketracel white degradation accelerated post-mortem. Odo examined the explosive devices. Each one carried enough firepower to breach the reactor shielding. If they'd succeeded. Sisko to Thrawn, the captain said, relief barely concealed. Your prediction was accurate. Boarding party neutralized. Excellent. Now observe their reserve force. In approximately 90 seconds, they will attempt a coordinated strike on your lower docking ring, anticipating that your attention is focused on the primary engagement. This is when the Chimaera will demonstrate its value. Sisko watched the tactical display. True to Thrawn's prediction, the 5 reserve Jem'Hadar ships suddenly accelerated, angling for DS-9's lower sections where defensive coverage was weakest. The Defiant was too far out of position to intercept. The Klingon birds of prey were engaged with the frontal assault. The Chimaera rotated on its axis with agonizing slowness, damaged maneuvering thrusters struggling against the ship's massive inertia. Its turbolaser batteries, previously dark and inactive, suddenly blazed with emerald fire. The effect was devastating. Turbolasers didn't fire in discrete beams like phasers or in pulses like disruptors. They projected coherent energy that carved through space like visible scalpels, slower than conventional energy weapons but carrying exponentially more destructive power. The first Jem'Hadar ship took a direct hit amidships. Its shields collapsed instantly. The hull didn't explode, it simply vaporized, atoms scattered across vacuum as the turbolaser's energy converted matter directly into plasma. 3 more shots. 3 more Jem'Hadar ships reduced to expanding debris clouds. The 5th ship tried to evade, its pilot recognizing the threat and desperately altering course. Thrawn's gunners tracked the movement with mechanical precision. The turbolaser caught the Jem'Hadar vessel as it attempted to warp away, the green beam intersecting the ship's nacelle just as it entered subspace. The result was a cascade failure that tore the ship apart from the inside out. In ops, everyone stared at the view screen in stunned silence. What in the prophet's name was that? Kira breathed. O'Brien pulled up the energy readings, his Irish accent thick with disbelief. Captain, those weapons, they're not directed energy in any conventional sense. They're projecting some kind of coherent particle stream, massive energy expenditure, but the destructive capability is off every scale I know. One of those shots carries more punch than a full spread of quantum torpedoes. Dax checked her sensors. The Chimaera's power systems are fluctuating. He wasn't exaggerating about the risk, their reactor is on the verge of cascade failure. They fired those weapons knowing it might destroy their own ship. Sisko understood immediately. Thrawn hadn't just defended DS-9. He'd demonstrated that the Chimaera, even crippled, represented firepower the Federation desperately needed. Refugees could be ignored. Weapons platforms commanded respect. The remaining Jem'Hadar ships retreated, their tactical algorithms recognizing an unwinnable scenario. The Defiant pursued briefly before Worf recalled them to defensive positions. Within minutes, the battle was over. DS-9 had survived with minimal casualties. 2 ships damaged, 17 wounded, 0 fatalities. By Dominion War standards, it was a miracle. All hands, stand down from red alert, Sisko ordered. Damage control teams, begin repairs. Medical, prepare to receive wounded from the SeaTac. He paused. Commander Dax, accompany me to the Chimaera. I think the Grand Admiral and I need to have a conversation. The Chimaera's bridge was barely functional. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadow. Smoke hung in the air from overloaded circuits. Crew members moved with disciplined efficiency despite obvious exhaustion, their gray uniforms stained with coolant and hydraulic fluid. Stormtroopers stood at attention flanking the command walkway, their white armor scorched and cracked. Thrawn stood before a holographic tactical display, reviewing the battle's aftermath with Commander Vanto. He turned as Sisko and Dax materialized, offering a slight nod. Captain. Commander. I trust the station sustained minimal damage. Thanks to you, Sisko acknowledged. Your predictions were accurate down to the second. The boarding party, the reserve force timing, even the shield vulnerability windows. How? Pattern recognition and cultural analysis. The Jem'Hadar are bred for combat, which makes them predictable. They follow genetic programming optimized for certain tactical scenarios. Once I identified their psychological conditioning through combat reports, projecting their behavior became straightforward mathematics. Thrawn gestured to his display. However, I noticed something troubling. The Jem'Hadar retreated too quickly. Normally, they fight to the death. Today, they withdrew after losing approximately 60% of their force. Why? Dax considered this. You're right. That's not typical Jem'Hadar behavior. They usually don't retreat unless ordered by a Vorta overseer. Precisely. Which suggests today's attack wasn't designed to capture Deep Space Nine. It was reconnaissance. Thrawn highlighted the battle pattern. They probed your defenses, tested response times, observed coordination between allied ships. And most significantly, they gathered data on the Chimaera's capabilities. Commander Dax, how long before the Dominion analyzes today's battle and adapts their tactics? 48 to 72 hours. They're extremely efficient at tactical evolution. Then we have approximately 60 hours to prepare for the real assault. Today was merely an opening move. Thrawn turned to Sisko directly. Captain, I've proven my tactical value. Now I require your assistance implementing broader defensive strategies. The Dominion won't make the same mistakes twice. Neither can we. Before Sisko could respond, Commander Vanto interrupted. Admiral, we have a problem. Engineering reports reactor instability is accelerating. The weapon's discharge pushed our systems beyond safety margins. We're looking at catastrophic failure within 36 hours unless we can secure replacement power conduits and dilithium to stabilize the matter-antimatter reaction. Thrawn absorbed this without visible concern. Captain Sisko, I'm prepared to offer a formal alliance. The Chimaera and its crew will operate under Federation oversight in exchange for repair assistance and integration into your defensive infrastructure. My crew possesses combat expertise and technological knowledge that could prove invaluable. In return, you gain a strategic advisor and a weapons platform that, once repaired, will significantly enhance this station's defensive capabilities. You want to join Starfleet? Sisko asked skeptically. I want to survive, Captain. My crew is stranded in your universe with no means of returning home. We can either wither away as refugees dependent on your charity, or we can contribute meaningfully to the conflict that surrounds us. I prefer the latter. Thrawn's red eyes held Sisko's gaze. I've studied your Federation's principles. You value diversity, cooperation, and the integration of different species working toward common goals. My people fit that paradigm. The question is whether your principles extend to warriors from another reality. Dax spoke up. Captain, from a scientific perspective, the Chimaera represents an unprecedented opportunity. Their technology operates on completely different principles. If we can adapt their weapons systems, their defensive capabilities, even their computational methods, it could change the balance of this war. Sisko walked to the view screen, looking out at Deep Space Nine floating in the distance. Behind him, he felt the weight of 6,000 Imperial crew members awaiting his decision. Thrawn had proven his tactical genius. But trust required more than competence, it required understanding motivation. Grand Admiral, you served an empire. The Federation is a democracy. Our military answers to civilian authority. We have rules of engagement, protocols, ethical guidelines that might seem restrictive compared to what you're accustomed to. Can you operate within those constraints? Captain Sisko, I served the Empire because it represented order against chaos. The Emperor is dead, that much I learned from your historical databases when I accessed your communications networks. The Empire I knew no longer exists in my galaxy, and even if it did, it's unreachable. Loyalty to a dead regime is pointless. Thrawn's tone remained analytical, emotionless. What matters now is identifying which side represents stability and which represents existential threat. Therefore, I choose the Federation. Not out of ideological conviction, but strategic pragmatism. That's not exactly inspiring confidence, Kira's voice cut in over the comm she'd been monitoring from DS9. We're supposed to trust someone who admits he's only working with us because we're the least bad option. Thrawn's expression didn't change. Major Kira, would you prefer I lie and claim sudden philosophical conversion? I respect your intelligence too much for that. I offer you honesty. I am a strategic asset without a home, choosing to align with the side that offers the best probability of long-term survival while opposing genuine tyranny. If that's insufficient, tell me what would satisfy your requirements for trust. Silence hung over the comm channel. Finally, Sisko made his decision. Chief O'Brien, coordinate with the Chimaera's engineering staff. Get them the materials they need to stabilize their reactor. Dax, work with their science division to begin compatibility analysis between our technologies. Odo, maintain security presence on their ship, but treat them as provisional allies, not prisoners. He turned to Thrawn. Grand Admiral, welcome to the Federation. Provisionally. You'll operate as an independent advisor reporting directly to me. Your crew will receive medical treatment, quarters, and access to station facilities. In exchange, you'll provide tactical consultation and defensive support. But understand, one betrayal, one violation of Federation law, and this arrangement ends. Permanently. Thrawn inclined his head. Acceptable terms, Captain. I believe this arrangement will prove mutually beneficial. Now, if I may suggest, we should begin planning for the Dominion's inevitable counteroffensive. They will analyze today's battle and return with adapted tactics. We must be ready. As Sisko and Dax prepared to transport back to DS9, Thrawn added one final observation. Captain, one more thing. The Romulan vessel that docked yesterday, Commander Kara's of the Tal Shiar. She will attempt to recruit me within the next 24 hours. The Romulans recognize strategic value when they observe it. How would you prefer I handle their overture? Sisko paused. You knew about that? I observed her ship's arrival and identified its configuration as Romulan intelligence. Her purpose was obvious. So I ask again, how should I respond when she makes contact? Tell her the truth, Sisko said after consideration. You're working with the Federation. If she wants your consultation, she can coordinate through official channels. And if she offers something the Federation cannot? Advanced cloaking technology, for instance, or intelligence on Dominion fleet movements. Thrawn watched Sisko carefully. I'm asking because the Romulans will offer precisely what they think I need most. That's how effective recruitment works. Sisko met those red eyes directly. Then you'll have a choice to make, Grand Admiral. The Federation doesn't buy loyalty, we earn it through shared principles and mutual respect. If the Romulans offer something more appealing than that, you were never really with us to begin with. Thrawn smiled, that same controlled expression from their first meeting. An elegant answer, Captain. I look forward to learning whether your Federation's principles survive contact with pragmatic reality. History suggests they rarely do. As Sisko and Dax dematerialized, Thrawn turned back to his tactical displays. Commander Vanto approached cautiously. Sir, do you actually intend to honor this agreement with the Federation? Of course, Commander. They offer survival, resources, and a conflict where our expertise provides measurable value. Why would I betray that? Thrawn studied the star charts. The question isn't whether I'll honor our agreement. The question is whether they'll honor it when I'm forced to recommend tactics that violate their precious principles. He highlighted several Dominion-controlled systems. The Federation fights with compassion. The Dominion fights to win. If we're to survive, Captain Sisko will have to choose which matters more, his ideals or his people's lives. That choice will define whether this alliance endures or collapses. Outside, the Bajoran sun set over DS9, casting long shadows across the station's hull. Inside, two very different military minds had formed an uneasy partnership. Whether that partnership would save the Alpha Quadrant or tear it apart remained to be seen. The Dominion was already planning their response. And Thrawn was counting on it. Commander Karras waited in Quark's bar, nursing a Romulan ale and watching the promenade's evening crowd with practiced patience. The Tal Shiar operative had learned decades ago that the best intelligence came from observation, not interrogation. In the 72 hours since Thrawn's arrival, she'd catalogued every interaction, every communication pattern, every supply transfer between the Chimaera and Deep Space Nine. What she'd observed was fascinating. Thrawn moved through the station like a surgical instrument, precise, purposeful, leaving nothing to chance. He studied crew rotations, analyzed defensive weaknesses, and most tellingly, spent hours in cultural databases examining Romulan art, history, and military doctrine. He was preparing for something. The question was what? The Grand Admiral entered the bar precisely at 2100 hours, alone. He dismissed his usual escort, a calculated gesture of either confidence or invitation. Karras remained seated, letting him come to her. Power dynamics began with who approached whom. Thrawn slid into the booth without requesting permission. Commander Karras. I've been expecting this meeting since your arrival. Shall we dispense with diplomatic pretense and discuss why the Tal Shiar wants to recruit me? Direct. Karras appreciated that. You're a strategic asset without allegiance. The Romulan Star Empire can offer resources the Federation cannot, cloaking technology, intelligence networks spanning both quadrants, and most importantly, freedom from their restrictive ethical guidelines. We recognize brilliance when we observe it, Grand Admiral. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to recognize opportunity. An elegant pitch. However, you're operating from flawed assumptions. Thrawn gestured for Quark to bring 2 drinks. Romulan ale for Karras, something amber for himself. You assume I value freedom over structure. I don't. The empire I served was authoritarian, hierarchical, and brutally efficient. But it was also predictable. The Romulan government, by contrast, operates through layers of deception, competing intelligence agencies, and political factions that assassinate each other with alarming regularity. Your Tal Shiar answers to the Senate, which answers to pressure from military commanders, who are influenced by various noble houses. It's chaos disguised as order. Kara's expression remained neutral, but internally she recalculated. He'd analyzed Romulan power structures with disturbing accuracy. And the Federation is better? An idealistic democracy that debates ethical implications while its enemies conquer territory. The Federation is inefficient, yes. But inefficiency born from democratic process is more stable than efficiency born from fear of assassination. Thrawn accepted his drink from Quark, who lingered slightly too long, earning a warning glance from Karas. The Ferengi retreated. However, I'm not here to debate governmental philosophy. You mentioned intelligence networks. I'm interested. Now they were negotiating. Karas leaned forward. The Tal Shiar has operatives throughout Dominion territory. We know their fleet positions, supply routes, border command structures. Information Captain Sisko doesn't have access to because Starfleet intelligence is, frankly, amateurish compared to our capabilities. Work with us, and you'll have intelligence superiority the Federation cannot provide. In exchange for what? Tactical consultation on Romulan military operations. Analysis of Dominion strategic patterns. And most critically, your presence at the Romulan border when we launch our offensive against the Dominion shipyards at Calvor. Karas pulled out a data isolinear rod. This contains preliminary intelligence on Dominion fleet deployments in the Gamma Quadrant. A gesture of good faith. Take it. Study it. Then tell me Captain Sisko can provide equivalent resources. Thrawn accepted the rod, examining it briefly before pocketing it. An impressive opening offer. However, you're omitting the actual price. The Tal Shiar doesn't trade intelligence for consultation. You want something more. We want you, Karas said flatly. Not as an advisor, as an architect. The Romulan military command recognizes that this war will reshape the Alpha Quadrant. When it ends, power structures will shift. The Federation may emerge stronger, or it may collapse under its own idealistic weight. The Klingon will demand territorial concessions. The Cardassians are already broken. But the Romulans, she smiled coldly. We're patient. We plan for the post-war landscape. And we want you designing our strategy for that future. You're recruiting me to help the Romulan Empire dominate the post-Dominion power vacuum. We're recruiting you to help ensure order prevails over chaos. Isn't that what you valued in your empire? Structure. Stability. Strategic vision that extends beyond immediate tactical victories. Karas finished her ale. The Federation fights to survive. We fight to win. Choose accordingly. Thrawn was silent for exactly 10 seconds, long enough that Karas wondered if she'd overplayed. Then he spoke, his voice analytical and detached. Your offer is strategically sound. The intelligence you're providing would indeed enhance defensive capabilities. And post-war planning is something the Federation actively avoids due to its democratic process requiring public debate about uncomfortable realities. He paused. However, you're making the same mistake Captain Sisko made. You assume I'm choosing based on who offers me the most. I'm not. I'm choosing based on who represents the least existential threat. Explain. The Dominion views all solids as inferior, genetic authoritarianism that cannot coexist with diversity. They must be destroyed. The Federation, despite its flaws, represents a democratic alternative. Imperfect, inefficient, but adaptable. The Romulan Empire, Thrawn's red eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. You represent strategic pragmatism without ethical constraints. In the short term, that's effective. In the long term, it's how empires collapse into tyranny that provokes rebellion. I've seen it before. Karas felt her carefully constructed recruitment pitch crumbling. You're refusing. I'm proposing an alternative. I'll provide tactical consultation to Romulan forces through official alliance channels. I'll analyze the intelligence you've offered and share relevant findings with all allied powers, Federation, Klingon, and Romulan. I'll even attend your Calvar offensive as an observer and offer strategic recommendations. But I won't architect your post-war domination strategy. That's not survival, that's conquest. And conquest invites the same chaos I'm trying to prevent. The Tal Shiar doesn't accept partial cooperation. Then the Tal Shiar will operate without access to my analysis. A strategically foolish position, but your choice to make. Thrawn stood, preparing to leave. Commander Karras, I respect Romulan efficiency. But efficiency without ethical boundaries becomes the very tyranny you're fighting against. The Dominion proves that. If you want my cooperation, it will be on terms that don't require me to help create the next existential threat. Karras watched him walk away, her mind racing through contingencies. He'd rejected recruitment but offered limited cooperation. The Senate would be displeased, but the intelligence exchange might satisfy them. Unless... Grand Admiral, she called out. One final question. What happens when the Federation asks you to choose between their principles and winning this war? What happens when Captain Sisko's compassion costs lives that tactical ruthlessness could save? Will your allegiance to their ideals survive that reality? Thrawn paused at the doorway. An excellent question, Commander. I suggest you monitor the situation closely. The answer will emerge when the Dominion inevitably exploits the Federation's predictable mercy. When that happens, we'll discover whether Starfleet values survival more than philosophy. He left. Karras sat in the booth, analyzing the conversation from every angle. Thrawn had refused recruitment but revealed a critical vulnerability. He'd allied with the Federation despite recognizing their tactical limitations. That created opportunities. If the Tal Shiar could engineer a scenario where Federation principles directly conflicted with survival. Her communicator chirped. Karras, this is the Terex. We're receiving coded transmission from Cardassia Prime. Priority Alpha. She stood immediately, leaving payment for quark and heading toward the docking ring. The transmission would contain intelligence from deep cover operatives in Dominion territory. If it contained what she suspected, evidence of the Dominion's next major offensive, she'd have leverage to force Thrawn's cooperation whether he wanted it or not. The Federation's idealism would be tested soon enough. In DS9's wardroom, Sisko reviewed Thrawn's tactical recommendations for the station's expanded defensive perimeter. The Grand Admiral had spent the past 3 days analyzing everything: shield modulation frequencies, weapons placement, crew rotation schedules, supply line vulnerabilities. His proposals were brilliant and deeply unsettling. He wants us to mine the Bajoran system, Kira said, disbelief evident. Place cloaked self-replicating mines throughout the entire sector. Thousands of them. Any Dominion ship that enters would be destroyed automatically. It's effective, Worf rumbled from his position at the table. The Klingon had joined the meeting via subspace from the Defiant. The Dominion cannot conquer what they cannot reach. The mines would create an impenetrable defensive zone. It would also violate about a dozen Federation regulations, O'Brien pointed out. Self-replicating weapons are banned under the Treaty of Algeron. Indiscriminate minefields violate rules of engagement. And cloaking the mines? That's using Romulan technology for offensive purposes, which directly contradicts our agreement with them. Dax pulled up tactical simulations. But if we implemented Thrawn's proposal, casualty projections for defending DS9 drop by 73%. We'd eliminate the need for constant fleet presence. Starships could be redeployed to offensive operations instead of static defense. Strategically, it's sound. Strategically, it's ruthless, Sisko corrected. And it puts us on a slippery slope. Today we deploy mines that kill indiscriminately. Tomorrow we use biological weapons because they're efficient. Where does it end? The door chimed. Thrawn entered with Commander Vanto, carrying data pads and looking like someone who'd anticipated this exact debate. Captain Sisko, I understand your ethical concerns. However, ethics are luxury afforded to those with the resources to be merciful. The Dominion possesses numerical superiority, genetic engineering that produces endless soldiers, and shapeshifters who can infiltrate any organization. You're fighting an enemy that views compassion as exploitable weakness. My mind proposal eliminates that advantage. By becoming like them, Kira said sharply. By throwing away the principles that make the Federation worth defending. Major Kira, you fought a guerrilla war against Cardassian occupiers for years. Did you always follow Federation principles? Or did you use whatever tactics necessary to drive them off Bajorans? Thrawn's tone remained neutral, analytical. I've read your service record. The Konma resistance cell you operated with destroyed Cardassian supply depots, killing logistics personnel who were non-combatants by strict military definition. You accepted collateral damage because liberation required it. Why is that different from what I'm proposing? Kira's eyes flashed with anger. Because we were fighting for our survival against occupiers. This is different. Is it? The Dominion seeks to occupy the entire Alpha Quadrant. Your conflict with them is existential. The only difference is scale. Thrawn activated his datapad, displaying casualty projections. Without the minefield, DS9 will face an average of one major assault every 3 weeks for the duration of this war. Casualty projections, 400 to 600 per engagement. Over a 6-month period, that's approximately 3,000 casualties defending this single location. With the minefield, those casualties drop to near zero. The Dominion loses ships instead of you losing people. Explain why that's unethical. Sisko felt the weight of command pressing down. Thrawn was right from a purely tactical standpoint. But tactics weren't everything. Grand Admiral, the Federation was founded on principles that distinguish us from authoritarian regimes. We don't use weapons that kill indiscriminately. We don't deploy technology that can't distinguish between combatants and civilians. The moment we abandon those principles, we become what we're fighting against. Respectfully, Captain, that's self-defeating logic. The Dominion doesn't care about your principles. The Founders will exploit your mercy, your hesitation, your commitment to ethical warfare. They'll use it to kill your people while you debate moral philosophy. Thrawn's voice hardened slightly. I served an empire that conquered through ruthless efficiency. I've also observed empires that fell because they valued honor over survival. The latter are extinct. The former are remembered. Choose which legacy you prefer. Silence filled the wardroom. Worf broke it, his deep voice thoughtful. Grand Admiral, among Klingon, there is a saying, 4,000 throats may be cut in one night by a running man. It means that sometimes, the honorable path requires dishonorable methods. But honor is defined by purpose, not technique. If we deploy your minds to defend innocent lives, is that not honorable? The Klingon perspective is useful, Thrawn acknowledged. But Captain Sisko commands here, not Klingon philosophy. The question is whether he possesses the strategic flexibility to do what's necessary. Sisko stood, walking to the window overlooking Bajorans. The planet turned slowly below. A world that had suffered occupation, liberation, and now faced existential threat again. Millions of Bajorans depended on DS9's defensive capabilities. His crew depended on him making decisions that kept them alive. But if he crossed certain lines, what was he defending? No, Sisko said finally. We're not deploying the minefield. Not because it's ineffective, but because it represents a line we don't cross. The Federation fights to preserve a certain vision of civilization. One where we don't kill indiscriminately, even when it's convenient. If we abandon that, we're not defending anything worth preserving. Thrawn absorbed this without visible reaction. I understand, Captain. However, I'm obligated to note this decision will cost lives. When the next Dominion assault comes, and your casualty count rises, remember this moment. Remember you chose principles over survival. "I'll remember," Sisko said quietly. "And I'll live with the consequences. But I won't become a tyrant to defeat one." A noble sentiment. History will judge whether it was wise. Thrawn gathered his datapads. "I have alternative defensive proposals that remain within your ethical guidelines. Less effective, but perhaps acceptable. Shall we review those instead?" As they worked through compromised tactical solutions, Sisko felt the fundamental tension of their alliance. Thrawn was brilliant, effective, and completely pragmatic. The Federation was principled, idealistic, and often inefficient. Together, they might win this war. But the cost might be discovering which set of values actually survived when tested by existential crisis. On the promenade below, Odo observed Romulan Commander Kara's boarding her vessel. She'd been on the station for 3 days, undoubtedly recruiting Thrawn or gathering intelligence. The changeling's security instincts prickled. Too many variables, too many competing agendas converging on DS9. The Dominion War was becoming something more complicated than simple conquest. It was becoming a crucible where every power's philosophy would be tested. And Thrawn, the outsider with no stake in anyone's ideology, would be the catalyst forcing those tests. Whether the Federation emerged stronger or broken would depend on choices not yet made. But the Dominion was already making theirs. The intelligence arrived at 0400 hours, transmitted through encrypted Romulan channels to Deep Space Nine's operations center. Sisko stood in his pajamas, called from sleep by Dax's urgent summons. On the main view screen, a founder, one of the shape-shifting rulers of the Dominion, addressed what appeared to be a gathering of Vorta administrators and Cardassian military officials. "This is 3 days old," Dax explained, her voice tight. Romulan intelligence intercepted it from a deep-cover operative in Cardassian space. "Captain, they're planning something big." The founder's liquid voice emanated from the speakers. "The Federation's defense of Deep Space Nine demonstrates their predictable reliance on static positions and ethical constraints. Their new advisor, this Grand Admiral Thrawn, has improved their tactical efficiency, but he operates within their self-imposed limitations. We will exploit this. The Breen Confederacy has agreed to join our alliance, bringing energy-dampening weapons that will neutralize Starfleet's technological advantages. Combined assault, 7 sectors simultaneously. The Federation will be forced to choose which worlds to defend and which to sacrifice." The transmission ended. The wardroom fell silent. 7 sectors, O'Brien breathed. "That's billions of people. Starfleet can't defend them all simultaneously. We don't have the ships." Worf's image appeared on the secondary display, patched in from the Defiant. "When does the attack occur?" "The intelligence doesn't specify exact timing," Dax said. "But based on Breen fleet movements and Dominion logistical patterns, we estimate 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe less." Sisko rubbed his face, exhaustion warring with the immediate need for tactical planning. "Get Thrawn up here. Now. And contact Starfleet Command, they need to see this immediately." Thrawn arrived within minutes, fully dressed despite the hour. His red eyes scanned the intelligence report with frightening speed, absorbing tactical details that took others minutes to process. When he spoke, his voice carried the calm certainty of someone who'd already run probability calculations. The Dominion is implementing a classic overwhelming force doctrine. 7 simultaneous strikes force resource dispersion. Starfleet's defensive fleet will fragment trying to protect multiple targets, becoming vulnerable at each location. The Breen energy weapons are the critical factor. They'll neutralize your shield and weapons systems, rendering your technological superiority meaningless. He pulled up a star chart, highlighting the 7 targeted sectors. "Captain, conventional defense is impossible. You don't have sufficient ships or strategic depth to hold all these positions. So what do we do?" Kira demanded. "Abandon 6 sectors to save 1. No. You changed the paradigm entirely. Thrawn's fingers moved across the tactical display, redrawing fleet positions. The Dominion expects you to defend. Instead, you attack. Launch a preemptive strike against their primary shipyards in Cardassian space. Cripple their production capacity before they can deploy the 7-sector offensive. Force them to divert resources to defend their industrial base instead of attacking yours. Sisko felt ice in his stomach. You're proposing we strike deep into Dominion-controlled territory. That's not a defensive operation, that's an invasion. It's survival, Captain. The Dominion has massed forces for offensive operations, leaving their rear echelons vulnerable. Their shipyards at Monarch are producing 60% of their new attack vessels. Destroy Monarch, and you cripple their ability to sustain prolonged warfare. The 7-sector assault becomes impossible without reinforcement capacity. The Monarch shipyards are in the Chintoka system, Dax interjected, pulling up specifications. Heavily defended, orbital weapon platforms, minefields, permanent Jem'Hadar garrison. Intelligence estimates it would take a fleet of at least 200 starships to successfully assault that position. We don't have those numbers available without stripping defenses from critical sectors. Correct. Which is why you don't assault it conventionally. You infiltrate. Thrawn zoomed in on the Chintoka system's defensive grid. The Dominion's security protocols assume attackers will announce their presence through conventional approach vectors. But what if a small strike force, say, 20 ships, entered the system using Romulan cloaking technology, positioned themselves within the defensive perimeter before decloaking, and destroyed the shipyards before the Dominion could respond? That's a suicide mission, Worf growled. 20 ships against those defenses. Even with surprise, casualties would be catastrophic. 73% probability of total loss for the strike force, yes. But 100% probability the shipyards are destroyed, preventing the 7-sector offensive that would kill billions. Which is the acceptable outcome, Commander? Thrawn met Worf's gaze through the view screen. This is what warfare requires, commanders willing to sacrifice pieces to win the larger game. The question is whether Starfleet possesses that willingness. Sisko felt every eye in the room turn to him. This was the moment Thrawn had predicted during their minefield debate, the moment when Federation principles collided with survival mathematics. Sending 20 ships and their crews on a suicide mission to save billions. Conducting a preemptive strike deep into enemy territory. Using Romulan cloaking technology in violation of treaty restrictions. Everything the Federation claimed to oppose. Everything necessary to win. There has to be another way, Sisko said, but even as he spoke, he knew how weak it sounded. There isn't. Thrawn's tone remained analytical, devoid of emotion. I've run 14 alternative scenarios. All result in higher casualties or strategic failure. The Monarch strike is brutal, unethical by your standards, and absolutely necessary. Captain Sisko, you told me the Federation doesn't abandon its principles even when survival demands it. I respected that position. Now I'm testing whether you meant it. Kira stood abruptly. You're backing him into a corner. Forcing him to either accept a suicide mission or take responsibility for billions of deaths. That's not tactical advice, that's manipulation. It's reality, Major. War doesn't offer comfortable choices. It offers terrible options and worse ones. Leaders must choose. Thrawn turned back to Sisko. Captain, I understand your hesitation. In my galaxy, I watched the Rebel Alliance struggle with similar dilemmas, whether to accept collateral damage to strike Imperial targets, whether to sacrifice squadrons to achieve strategic objectives. Those who hesitated lost. Those who accepted ugly necessities survived. You have approximately 6 hours before Starfleet Command expects your tactical recommendation. Choose wisely. The Grand Admiral left, his white uniform disappearing into the corridor. Silence filled ops. O'Brien broke it first. Captain, he's not wrong about the mathematics. If the Dominion launches that 7-sector offensive, casualties could reach tens of millions. If we strike Monarch first, we send 6,000 people to die, Sisko finished. Crew members with families, lives, futures. I sign the order, and they die. That's what Thrawn's asking me to do. It's what command requires, Worf said quietly. I have served in Starfleet long enough to know that sometimes, a captain must order warriors to death for the greater good. It is the burden of leadership. But it is also necessary. Dax moved closer to Sisko, her voice soft. Ben, there's a third option. We could present Thrawn's plan to Starfleet Command and let them make the decision. Take it out of your hands. And pass responsibility upward while people die because I was too afraid to choose. Sisko shook his head. No. If this decision needs to be made, I make it here. That's what command means. He walked to his office, closing the door behind him. For 30 minutes, he sat alone, reviewing casualty projections. 7 sectors under simultaneous assault, civilian populations, Starfleet personnel, entire colonies. The numbers were staggering. Against that, 20 star ships, 6,000 crew members, families who would receive condolence letters explaining their loved ones died for strategic necessity. The mathematics were clear. The morality was murky. At 0500 hours, Sisko made his decision. He returned to Ops, where his senior staff had remained, waiting. Their faces showed exhaustion, concern, and recognition that whatever he was about to say would define them all. Contact Admiral Ross at Starfleet Command, Sisko said, his voice steady. Tell him we have intelligence indicating a 7-sector Dominion offensive, and that I'm recommending a preemptive strike against the Monarch shipyards. I'll lead the mission personally with the Defiant. We'll need Romulan cloaking technology, which means coordinating with their fleet. 20 ships, volunteers only. No one goes on this mission under orders, they go because they understand what's at stake. Kira's eyes widened. Captain, you're authorizing a suicide mission. I'm authorizing a strategic strike with high casualty probability. There's a difference. Sisko's jaw tightened. And before anyone asks, yes, I've considered the ethical implications. Yes, it violates several Federation principles about proportional response and preemptive warfare. Yes, it makes me complicit in exactly the kind of pragmatic ruthlessness Thrawn represents. But if I don't authorize this, and the Dominion kills millions because I was too principled to act, that's also a choice. I'm choosing the option that saves more lives, even if it costs me sleep for the rest of mine. Dax initiated the communication protocols. Admiral Ross is standing by. Subspace connection established. Admiral William Ross appeared on screen, gray-haired, weathered, carrying the weight of a war that was consuming the Federation. Captain Sisko. I've reviewed the Romulan intelligence. What's your assessment? Sir, Grand Admiral Thrawn has proposed a preemptive strike against the Monarch shipyards. It's high risk, probable high casualties, but it prevents the 7-sector offensive. I'm recommending we proceed, and I'm volunteering to lead the strike force personally. Ross was silent for a long moment. Captain, you understand what you're asking? Authorization for a deep strike into Dominion territory, probable loss of 20 Federation starships, using tactics that push the boundaries of our rules of engagement. If this goes wrong, you won't just lose the ships, you'll give the Dominion a propaganda victory that could turn neutral systems against us. I understand, sir. But if it goes right, we prevent mass casualties and cripple their offensive capacity for months. Thrawn's analysis is sound. The mathematics support the action. Thrawn. Ross's expression soured. The Imperial Admiral from another reality who's been advising you for a week. Captain, how confident are you in his loyalty? Completely uncertain, sir. But his tactical analysis has been accurate to this point, and his strategic recommendations align with Federation survival. If he's manipulating us toward some ulterior goal, I haven't identified it yet. Ross considered this. Background noise suggested other admirals were present, debating off-screen. Finally, authorization granted. You'll coordinate with the Romulans. They've already agreed to provide cloaking support, which should tell you how seriously they're taking this intelligence. Captain, the Federation is trusting you with 6,000 lives. Make their sacrifice mean something. Yes, sir. Sisko felt the weight settle permanently on his shoulders. We launch in 48 hours. Sisko out. The channel closed. In ops, his crew stood at their stations, processing what had just been authorized. Kira looked conflicted. Dax appeared resigned. O'Brien simply looked tired. I need volunteers, Sisko said quietly. 20 ship captains willing to take their crews into Dominion space with a 73% mortality rate. I won't order anyone into this. It has to be their choice. You'll have volunteers, Worf said immediately. Klingon honor demands we face death rather than allow dishonor through inaction. I will command a bird of prey in your strike force. I'm going, Kira added. The Dominion allied with Cardassia. They're connected to everything that happened to Bajorans. If there's a chance to hurt them, I'm taking it. O'Brien nodded slowly. Someone needs to keep the Defiance systems running. Might as well be me. Dax smiled sadly. Ben, you're not going into that hell without your science officer. Besides, someone needs to calculate precise firing solutions when you're dodging orbital weapons platforms. Sisko felt emotion threatening to overwhelm tactical necessity. These people, his friends, were volunteering to die with him. Because that's what Thrawn's plan required. What command required. What survival required. Thank you, he said simply. All of you. Now let's get to work. We have 48 hours to plan an attack that violates everything we believe in to save everything we love. Elsewhere on the station, Thrawn stood in the Chimaera's observation deck, watching Deep Space Nine through the viewport. Commander Vanto approached cautiously. Admiral, Captain Sisko authorized your plan. He's leading the strike personally. As expected. Sisko possesses the moral courage to make difficult decisions when survival demands it. That's what distinguishes competent commanders from idealistic fools. Thrawn's expression remained neutral. However, the true test comes next. The Monarch operation will succeed or fail based on factors beyond tactical planning. It will depend on whether those crews can reconcile killing thousands to save millions. Whether they can live with themselves afterward. Sir, if the operation succeeds, won't that prove your methods work? Won't the Federation adopt more pragmatic approaches? Or it will break them, Commander. The Federation's strength comes from moral conviction. Strip that away, and they become indistinguishable from the Dominion, just another power using violence to impose order. The question is whether they can walk the line between principle and pragmatism without losing themselves. Thrawn turned from the viewport. We'll discover the answer at Chintoka. One way or another. The Dominion War was about to enter a new phase. And the Federation was about to discover whether noble ideals could survive when tested by the necessity of wholesale slaughter. Thrawn had already calculated the probability. The Federation hadn't. The strike force assembled in deep space, 40 light-years from the Chintoka system. 20 vessels hung in the darkness, Federation starships, Klingon birds of prey, and 3 Romulan warbuds equipped with the cloaking technology that would make this mission possible. Each ship represented 300 souls who'd volunteered knowing they might not return. On the Defiance Bridge, Sisko reviewed the final tactical plan with his senior staff. Thrawn's holographic image stood beside the tactical display, transmitted from the Chimaera which remained at Deep Space Nine. The Grand Admiral had been explicit, he was a strategic advisor, not a combat commander. His place was analyzing the larger war, not dying in a single battle. The Monarch shipyards consist of 14 orbital construction platforms, Thrawn explained, highlighting each target. Primary objectives are platforms 3, 7, and 11, they produce Jem'Hadar attack ships. Secondary objectives are the antimatter storage facilities on platforms 6 and 9. Tertiary objective is the central command station coordinating defensive operations. Your window between decloaking and defensive response is estimated at 97 seconds. You must destroy all primary targets within that time frame or the mission fails. 97 seconds, O'Brien muttered from engineering. To destroy 3 massive orbital platforms while avoiding weapons fire from the other 11. Brilliant. Chief, optimism is appreciated but not required, Sisko said dryly. He studied the attack vectors one final time. Each ship had specific targets, specific timing windows, specific retreat coordinates if everything went according to plan. Which it wouldn't. Combat never followed plans. Captain, Dax called from Sciences. I'm detecting a subspace signal. Romulan frequency, encoded. Commander Kara's is hailing you. Priority channel. Sisko's jaw tightened. The Romulan Tal Shiar agent had been suspiciously quiet since Thrawn's rejection of her recruitment offer. Now, hours before the largest offensive operation of the war, she wanted to talk. Put her through. Kara's face appeared on screen, her expression unreadable. Captain Sisko. I trust your preparations proceed smoothly. I wanted to offer additional intelligence before you depart. Intelligence that Grand Admiral Thrawn failed to mention in his tactical briefing. Thrawn's holographic image turned sharply. Commander Kara's, whatever you're about to reveal, consider carefully whether it serves Romulan interests or merely satisfies personal vendetta. The Dominion knows you're coming, Kara said flatly. Not your specific timing or approach vector, but they've detected Alliance fleet movements suggesting an offensive operation. They've reinforced the Monarch system with an additional Jem'Hadar squadron. 40 attack ships currently stationed in close defensive orbit. Your cloaking approach will work, but the moment you decloak, you'll face twice the defensive fire Thrawn predicted. Silence fell across the Defiance bridge. Sisko felt his blood run cold. How long have you known this? 72 hours. The Tal Shiar has deep cover operatives throughout Dominion command structures. We've been monitoring their response to intelligence leaks, yes, Captain, leaks. Someone informed the Dominion that Alliance forces were planning a strike. Not specifics, but enough to trigger defensive preparations. Kara's paused meaningfully. I wonder who had both the tactical knowledge and motivation to ensure this operation faced maximum resistance. All eyes turned to Thrawn's holographic form. The Grand Admiral's expression remained calm, analytical, utterly composed. An interesting accusation, Commander. However, I lack the communications capability to contact Dominion forces. I've been under Starfleet observation for the past week, and I have zero motivation to sabotage an operation designed to prevent Federation collapse. Your logic is flawed. Is it? You rejected Romulan recruitment. You've operated with suspicious independence despite claiming Federation allegiance. And most tellingly, you've consistently recommended tactics that force the Federation to compromise its principles. What better way to destabilize an ideological rival than by corrupting them from within? Kara's voice hardened. Captain Sisko, I'm advising you to abort this mission. The intelligence has been compromised. The Dominion is waiting. Sisko looked at Thrawn's hologram. Grand Admiral, did you leak intelligence to the Dominion? No, Captain. I did not. However, Commander Kara's raises valid counterintelligence concerns. Multiple parties had access to mission planning. Starfleet Command, Klingon High Council, Romulan Senate, and everyone aboard this strike force. The leak could have originated from any of those sources. Or, Thrawn's red eyes narrowed. The Romulan Tal Shiar could have manufactured this intelligence specifically to create doubt and abort an operation they don't control. Commander Karras, produce your deep cover operatives' verified credentials or withdraw your accusation. The Tal Shiar doesn't reveal operational security to satisfy Federation curiosity. How convenient. Thrawn turned to Sisko. Captain, you have a choice. Trust Romulan intelligence from a hostile operative who attempted to recruit me days ago, or proceed with the mission as planned. If Karras is telling the truth, you're flying into a trap. If she's lying, you're allowing Tal Shiar manipulation to prevent a critical strike. Either way, the Dominion wins. Decide. Sisko felt the weight of command crushing down. 6,000 lives depending on his next words. Billions more depending on whether the Monarch shipyards were destroyed. And no way to verify which intelligence source was accurate. Dax, contact Admiral Ross. I need independent confirmation of Dominion fleet movements in the Chintoka system. If they've reinforced as heavily as Karras claims, Starfleet intelligence should have detected it. 5 agonizing minutes passed. Ross's face appeared on screen, grim. Captain, I've reviewed our latest reconnaissance data. The Dominion has indeed increased defensive presence at Monarch, but it appears to be routine rotation, not emergency reinforcement. We're detecting approximately 15 additional attack ships, not 40. Commander Karras's intelligence is either outdated or exaggerated. Or your intelligence is incomplete, Karras countered. The Dominion could be using Breen cloaking technology to hide ship movements. You wouldn't detect them until they decloaked for combat. Thrawn's holographic image moved closer to Sisko. Captain, you're being paralyzed by uncertainty. This is precisely what effective counterintelligence operations accomplish. They don't need to stop you, they just need to make you stop yourself. Commander Karras knows that. She's exploiting your caution. Or I'm trying to prevent a massacre, Karras shot back. Captain Sisko, I have no interest in seeing Federation crews slaughtered unnecessarily. But I also won't allow blind faith in an advisor from another reality to override strategic caution. Abort the mission. Gather more intelligence. Attack when you're certain. By which time the Dominion launches their 7-sector offensive, Thrawn said coldly. Delay is death, Captain. Make your decision. Sisko stood, pacing the Defiant's small bridge. Every instinct screamed conflicting directions. Trust Thrawn, who'd been accurate but whose loyalty remained questionable. Trust Karras, whose Tal Shiar affiliation made her inherently untrustworthy. Trust Starfleet intelligence, which had been wrong before. Or trust himself. We proceed, Sisko said finally. But with modifications. Assume the Dominion has reinforced positions. Adjust attack vectors to account for additional defensive fire. Reduce our exposure window from 97 seconds to 60. Hit fast, hit hard, get out. If this is a trap, we spring it on our terms. Captain, that reduces our margin for error to near zero, Dax protested. If anything goes wrong, then we adapt. We always do. Sisko turned to the view screen. Commander Karras, thank you for the intelligence. Whether accurate or not, it's made us more cautious. That's probably wise. Thrawn, your tactical plan is still sound, we're just executing it faster and meaner. Admiral Ross, inform Starfleet Command we're initiating operations in 1 hour. All ships, battle stations. May the prophets guide us. The channels closed. On the Defiant, crew members moved with practiced efficiency, preparing weapons, coordinating shield modulations, running final system checks. Kira took her position at tactical, her Bajoran militia training evident in every controlled movement. O'Brien muttered prayers to engineering gods as he optimized power distribution. Worf's Klingon bird of prey, the Rotaran, took point position, its commander's voice growling readiness over the comm. 57 minutes later, 20 ships activated Romulan cloaking devices simultaneously. On sensors, they simply vanished, invisible to conventional detection methods, ghost ships carrying the weight of impossible missions. The strike force accelerated toward the Chintoka system at maximum warp. On Deep Space Nine, Thrawn watched them disappear from long-range sensors. Commander Vanto stood beside him, nervous. "Admiral, if Captain Sisko dies because of your tactical recommendations, then I accept responsibility for those deaths, Commander. But consider the alternative: if he doesn't strike, and the Dominion kills millions, who accepts responsibility for those deaths? Inaction is also a choice." Thrawn turned from the viewport. Captain Sisko understands this. That's why he's proceeding despite uncertainty. He's learned that command requires accepting culpability regardless of outcome. A valuable lesson. You're teaching him to think like you. I'm teaching him to survive, Commander. There's a difference. In the Chintoka system, 14 orbital shipyards continued their relentless production. Jem'Hadar attack ships rolled off assembly platforms every 6 hours, adding to the Dominion's vast armada. Vorta administrators monitored efficiency metrics, ensuring quotas were met. Jem'Hadar soldiers stood guard, genetically programmed to die defending this critical facility. None of them detected the approaching strike force. Cloaking technology was perfect invisibility, until it wasn't. The 20 ships dropped out of warp 300,000 kilometers from Monarch, still cloaked, still invisible. They drifted on momentum alone, weapons charged but not powered, maintaining absolute emission silence. On the Defiance bridge, Sisko counted down the final approach. 60 seconds to attack position, Dax whispered. All ships reporting ready. Romulan warbuds are coordinating cloak deactivation sequence. Weapons locked, Kira confirmed. Quantum torpedoes armed. Phaser banks charged. 30 seconds. Sisko gripped his command chair. This was it. The moment where Federation principles collided with survival necessity. Where he ordered the deaths of thousands, enemy combatants, yes, but still lives, to prevent the deaths of millions. The mathematics were sound. The morality was murky. The consequences were permanent. 10 seconds. 9. 8. On the Chimaera, Thrawn calculated probability outcomes with clinical precision. 73% casualty rate for the strike force. 96% probability of shipyard destruction. 41% probability Captain Sisko would survive. Acceptable margins. 3. 2. 1. Decloak. 20 ships materialized simultaneously inside the Monarch defensive perimeter. For exactly 2.7 seconds, the Dominion sensors registered impossible contacts, vessels appearing from nowhere, weapons hot, attack vectors optimized for maximum destruction. Then hell erupted. The Defiant unleashed a full spread of quantum torpedoes directly into Platform 7's antimatter storage. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. A miniature sun blooming in space as megatons of stored fuel converted to pure energy. Platform 7 simply ceased to exist, taking 4 Jem'Hadar ships caught in the blast radius with it. Klingon birds of prey swarmed Platform 11, their disruptors carving through structural supports while transport inhibitors prevented the Vorta administrators from beaming to safety. The platform broke apart in sections, tumbling into Monarch's gravity well where atmospheric friction completed the destruction. Romulan warbuds targeted Platform 3 with plasma torpedoes, superheated matter that melted through duranium plating like acid. Construction crews still working on partially completed attack ships died instantly, vaporized by temperatures exceeding stellar cores. And the Dominion responded. Commander Kara's had been partially correct. The Dominion hadn't stationed 40 additional ships. They'd stationed 60. They emerged from behind Monarch's moon, from orbital positions disguised as debris, from cloaked positions using technology the Federation hadn't known the Dominion possessed. The trap snapped shut. Evasive maneuvers. Sisko shouted as Polaron beams lanced through space. The Defiant rolled hard, her ablative armor absorbing hits that would have vaporized lesser ships. Around them, the strike force scattered, each vessel executing pre-programmed evasion patterns while continuing their attacks. The USS SeaTac, the Nebula-class ship they'd rescued days ago, took a concentrated barrage from 5 Jem'Hadar vessels. Her shields collapsed. Her hull breached in 17 locations. 300 souls died in the time it took Sisko to breathe. SeaTac is gone, Kira reported, voice tight. The Majestic and Valiant are taking heavy fire. Worf's bird of prey just lost shields, he's venting atmosphere. All ships, execute retreat pattern Delta, Sisko ordered. We've destroyed the primary targets. Get out now. But the Dominion had anticipated that too. Jem'Hadar's ships blocked the retreat vectors, forming a wall of firepower between the strike force and safety. To escape, they'd have to punch through. The Rotaran chose to punch first. Worf's Klingon bird of prey accelerated to ramming speed, its damaged hull trailing debris and atmosphere. The Klingon commander's voice roared over the comm, "Today is a good day to die." Kapla. The Rotaran struck a Jem'Hadar heavy cruiser head-on at 1/4 impulse. Both ships exploded simultaneously, the fusion reaction creating a temporary gap in the Dominion's defensive line. Through the gap. Now. Sisko commanded. The surviving ships, 16 of the original 20, poured through the opening Worf had died to create. Polaron beams chased them, destroying the USS Cochrane as it cleared the battle zone. 15 ships left. Quantum torpedoes and photon torpedoes filled space with lethal brilliance, covering the retreat with walls of destructive energy. The Defiant was the last ship through, her aft shields collapsing under sustained fire. O'Brien rerouted power from non-essential systems, keeping the engines alive through sheer engineering willpower. Dax calculated jump coordinates while simultaneously firing aft weapons. Kira coordinated defensive fire with the remaining ships, her Bajoran resistance instincts turning chaos into strategy. Warp drive online, O'Brien gasped. We can jump, but I don't know for how long. Do it. 15 ships jumped to warp simultaneously, leaving the burning ruins of the Monarch shipyards behind. Dominion sensors tracked them briefly before the distance became too great. In the Chintoka system, flames consumed what had been the Dominion's primary shipbuilding facility. Thousands of Jem'Hadar soldiers floated dead in vacuum. Vorta administrators died screaming as their stations depressurized. Construction platforms tumbled into Monarch's atmosphere, becoming shooting stars marking the Federation's bloodiest victory. 5 ships lost. 1,500 crew members dead. Including Worf, son of Moke, who'd chosen glorious death over tactical retreat. But the shipyards were destroyed. The 7-sector offensive was impossible. Millions of Federation citizens would live because 1,500 warriors had died. On the Defiance bridge, Sisko sat in his command chair, staring at casualty reports through vision that blurred with exhaustion and grief. They'd won. The mathematics proved it. The strategic outcome validated it. So why did it feel like defeat? Captain, Dax said softly. We should contact DS9. Let them know we survived. Sisko nodded mutely. The comm channel opened. Thrawn's holographic image appeared, his expression analytically approving. Captain Sisko. Congratulations on a successful operation. Casualty rates were higher than projected, 37.5% versus the estimated 73%. The shipyards are confirmed destroyed. The strategic objective is achieved. Well executed. Sisko stared at the Grand Admiral's hologram. This alien tactician from another reality, who'd calculated acceptable losses and predicted outcomes like a mathematical equation. Who'd been right about everything, the tactics, the necessity, the brutal cost. Who'd taught the Federation to win by teaching them to kill without hesitation? Worf is dead, Sisko said flatly. 1,500 people are dead. I ordered them into that hell, and they died because I listened to you. They died because you made the strategically correct decision, Thrawn corrected without emotion. And because of their sacrifice, billions will live. That is command, Captain. You accept responsibility for deaths that prevent greater deaths. Welcome to pragmatic warfare. You've learned quickly. Sisko wanted to scream. To rage. To reject everything Thrawn represented. But the exhaustion was too great, and the mathematics were too clear. Thrawn, was it worth it? The Grand Admiral was silent for exactly 3 seconds. When he spoke, something almost human entered his voice. Captain, I've ordered thousands to their deaths throughout my career. Each time, I ask that same question. The answer is always the same. It's worth it if you remember their names. If you carry the weight of those deaths forever. If you never become comfortable with the mathematics of sacrifice. The moment you stop questioning whether it was worth it. That's when you become the monster you're fighting against. For the first time since meeting Thrawn, Sisko heard something resembling genuine feeling in his voice. Not regret, exactly. But recognition. Understanding. Perhaps even shared pain. I'll remember, Sisko said quietly. Every single name. Then you're still a better commander than I ever was, Captain. Thrawn out. The channel closed. The Defiant limped toward Deep Space Nine at reduced warp, carrying survivors who'd learned that victory and defeat sometimes looked identical. Behind them, the Chintoka system burned, a monument to pragmatism triumphant over principle. The Dominion War had reached a turning point. The Federation had won a critical battle. But the cost was measured in compromised ideals and souls who'd learned to kill without hesitation. Thrawn had promised to teach them how to win. He'd never mentioned what they'd lose in the process. 3 weeks after the Battle of Chintoka, Deep Space Nine felt different. The station still functioned, crew rotations, cargo transfers, diplomatic meetings continued with practiced efficiency. But something fundamental had shifted in the corridors, in the wardroom conversations, in the eyes of officers who'd returned from the Monarch offensive. They'd won. Casualty reports confirmed it. Strategic analysis validated it. The Dominion's 7-sector offensive had been postponed indefinitely, their shipbuilding capacity crippled. 1,500 deaths had prevented millions. The mathematics were irrefutable. But mathematics didn't explain why Captain Sisko spent nights staring at personnel files of crew members who died under his command. Or why Kira flinched when the casualty count scrolled across ops displays. Or why O'Brien worked 18-hour shifts rather than face his family's questions about the battle. Thrawn observed all of this from his position as tactical advisor. The Grand Admiral had been vindicated, his strategy had worked exactly as predicted. Starfleet Command had authorized expanded consultation privileges. The Klingon High Council had sent formal commendations. Even the Romulan Senate acknowledged the operation's strategic value, though they maintained conspicuous silence about Commander Karaza's intelligence regarding Dominion reinforcements. But victories created complications. The Breen Confederacy, previously neutral, had accelerated their alliance with the Dominion after Chintoka, interpreting the Federation's aggressive strike as evidence of escalating conflict. Their energy-dampening weapons, initially intended for defensive deployment, were now being mass-produced for offensive operations. Intelligence suggested the Breen would enter the war within weeks, bringing technology that could neutralize Starfleet's tactical advantages. Thrawn studied the intelligence reports in DS9's wardroom, his red eyes tracking strategic implications invisible to others. Sisko sat across from him, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. Dax, Kira, O'Brien, and Odo completed the gathering. Worf's chair remained empty, a silent acknowledgement of loss that no one commented on but everyone felt. The Breen will deploy their energy weapons in coordinated strikes against key Federation installations, Thrawn explained, highlighting targets on his tactical display. Starbases, shipyards, communication relays. They'll target infrastructure rather than fleet assets, forcing you to choose between defending static positions or maintaining offensive capabilities. Classic resource dispersion doctrine. The Dominion has learned from Chintoka, they're adapting. So are we, Sisko said quietly. Starfleet Corps of Engineers is developing countermeasures to the Breen weapons. Shield modifications, secondary power systems, energy absorption grids. We'll be ready. Will you? Thrawn's tone suggested skepticism. Captain, the Breen weapons operate on principles your science doesn't fully understand yet. You're developing countermeasures against theoretical technology based on limited intelligence. That's hope, not strategy. Then what do you recommend? Kira's voice carried an edge. Ever since Chintoka, her interactions with Thrawn had grown more combative. Another preemptive strike? More suicide missions that kill our people to save abstract strategic objectives? If necessary, yes. Thrawn met her hostility with clinical calm. Major, you're angry because Chintoka forced you to confront uncomfortable realities about warfare. You prefer enemies who can be fought through resistance tactics and moral superiority. The Dominion doesn't allow that luxury. They exploit compassion, they adapt to every strategy, and they will destroy the Federation unless you're willing to match their pragmatism. Pragmatism, Odo repeated, his changeling features rippling with something like disgust. Is that what we're calling it now? 1,500 dead isn't pragmatism, it's sacrifice. And every sacrifice chips away at what makes the Federation worth defending. The Federation is worth defending because it represents billions of lives, Thrawn countered. Not because it represents abstract principles that feel morally satisfying. Constable, you're a founder. Genetically engineered to impose order on chaos. You understand better than anyone here that order requires difficult decisions. The founders you've rejected understood that. Why can't you? Because I chose to be better than them. Odo's voice rose, a rare display of emotion from the usually controlled shapeshifter. I chose to live by laws that protect the innocent, not by expedient tactics that justify any action. If I become what they are to defeat them, then I've already lost. Thrawn was silent for a moment, studying Odo with unsettling intensity. An admirable philosophy, Constable. History is filled with admirable philosophies held by extinct civilizations. Perhaps the Federation will prove different. Or perhaps you'll discover that survival requires compromises you're not prepared to make. Before anyone could respond, the comm system chimed. Ops to Captain Sisko. We're receiving a Priority 1 transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Ross, encrypted channel. Sisko stood immediately. Put it through to my office. Minutes later, the senior staff gathered around Sisko's desk as Admiral Ross's face appeared on the secure display. The Admiral looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks. Captain, we have a situation. The Dominion has responded to Chintoka with an operation of their own. They've infiltrated a founder into Starfleet headquarters on Earth. Silence. Then Dax breathed, how do you know? Because the founder revealed itself. Voluntarily. It walked into Admiral Nechayev's office 3 hours ago, reassumed its liquid form, and requested asylum. Ross's expression suggested he couldn't quite believe his own words. The founder claims it's defecting from the Dominion. It wants to provide intelligence in exchange for protection. That's impossible, Odo said immediately. Founders don't defect. The link is absolute, we're genetically programmed for unity. Individual founders can't develop ideological disagreements. It's biologically impossible. And yet here we are, Ross continued. The founder has already provided verifiable intelligence, Dominion fleet positions, Vorta command codes, Jem'Hadar breeding facility locations. Everything checks out. It's genuine intel that we can use. But Starfleet intelligence is divided on whether this is legitimate defection or an elaborate deception. It's deception, Thrawn said with absolute certainty. All eyes turned to him. Admiral, the Founders are shapeshifters who've spent millennia perfecting infiltration tactics. They understand psychology, they manipulate through trust, and they're patient beyond mortal comprehension. A defector appearing immediately after your most aggressive military operation. That's not coincidence. It's calculated response. That's speculation, Dax countered. What if the Founder genuinely disagrees with Dominion policy? Odo proves that changelings can develop independent thought. Maybe this Founder experienced similar philosophical evolution. Or maybe the Dominion observed Constable Odo's presence here and recognized an exploitable pattern, Thrawn replied. They know you have one changeling who chose Federation values over Founder ideology. They're providing you with another, offering intelligence that seems genuine, building trust. When that trust is established, the real infiltration begins. Classic long-term deception. Sisko rubbed his temples. Admiral Ross, what does Starfleet intelligence recommend? They're divided. Half want to accept the intelligence and monitor the Founder closely. Half want to imprison it immediately. President Jareshino is pushing for acceptance. He sees this as an opportunity to demonstrate that even Founders can choose peace over conquest. It's politically valuable for maintaining alliance cohesion. Politics, Kira muttered. People are making security decisions based on politics. People always make decisions based on politics, Major. That's how democracies function. Ross looked directly at Thrawn through the view screen. Grand Admiral, you've been accurate about Dominion tactics so far. If this is a deception operation, how would you prove it? Thrawn considered for exactly 5 seconds. You don't prove it through interrogation. Founders are biologically incapable of stress responses that would indicate deception. You don't prove it through isolated monitoring, they're patient enough to maintain cover indefinitely. You prove it by controlling the information they receive and observing what they do with it. Explain. Feed the Founder false intelligence. Tell it you're planning an operation that doesn't actually exist, a strike against a Dominion facility, a fleet movement to a specific system, a diplomatic initiative with a neutral power. Make the intelligence believable, classified, and strategically significant. Then monitor Dominion response. If they react to information only the Founder could have transmitted, you've confirmed it's a spy. If they don't react, the Founder might be genuine, or simply more patient than you anticipated. O'Brien nodded slowly. It's a trap within a trap. We're testing whether they're testing us. Correct, Chief. However, I recommend extreme caution. If the Founder is genuine, falsely accusing it damages Alliance credibility with potential Dominion defectors. If it's a spy, exposing it too early reveals that you've identified their infiltration method. Either outcome carries strategic costs. Captain Sisko, this decision requires careful consideration of variables beyond pure security concerns. Ross absorbed this. I'll present your recommendation to Starfleet Command. Captain, keep your station on elevated alert. If we've got one Founder infiltrator, we might have others. Ross out. The channel closed. Sisko's office felt smaller, more oppressive. The specter of shapeshifter infiltration had haunted the Federation since the Dominion War began. Random blood screenings, paranoia, accusations that destroyed careers and friendships. Now that fear was validated, Founders had penetrated Earth itself. We need to implement comprehensive blood screenings, Odo said reluctantly. Every crew member, every visitor to DS9. It's invasive, it damages morale, but it's necessary. It also creates exactly the paranoid atmosphere the Dominion wants, Kira countered. We start treating each other as potential enemies, and we tear ourselves apart from within. Both positions are correct, Thrawn observed. Which is why this is effective psychological warfare. The Dominion forces you to choose between security and trust. Either choice weakens you. The only question is which weakness you prefer, vulnerability to infiltration or vulnerability to internal collapse. Sisko stood, pacing the confined space. We implement blood screenings, but we do it methodically. No random accusations, no witch hunts. Odo, you coordinate with security. Make it routine, professional. Dax, work with sciences to see if there's any other method of detecting changelings besides blood tests. Kira, maintain operational readiness. Paranoia doesn't stop our jobs from getting done. And me, Captain? Thrawn asked. What would you have me do? Keep analyzing Dominion tactics. Keep predicting their moves. Sisko paused, choosing words carefully. Try to understand that the Federation fights for more than strategic outcomes. We fight for a vision of civilization where trust is possible, where diversity strengthens rather than weakens, where principles matter as much as survival. I know that seems inefficient to you. But it's who we are. I understand what you are, Captain. The question is whether what you are can survive what the Dominion represents. Thrawn gathered his datapads. I'll continue my analysis. But I suggest you prepare for the possibility that the defector founder is genuine. And that its defection will prove more dangerous than its loyalty ever was. He left. The senior staff remained in Sisko's office, processing implications that spiraled in every direction. A founder defector. Blood screenings. Psychological warfare that couldn't be countered without compromising the values they defended. Dax spoke first. Ben, do you trust Thrawn? I trust his tactical analysis. His loyalty? I don't know. He's been accurate about everything so far. Chintoka, Dominion strategy, Breen alliance. But there's something fundamentally alien about how he thinks. Not his species, his philosophy. He sees warfare as mathematics, lives as variables. I don't know if someone like that can truly understand what we're fighting for. Then why keep him as an advisor? Because being right matters more than being comfortable. And because, Sisko looked at the empty chair where Worf should have been sitting. Because I authorized Chintoka. I ordered 1,500 people to die because his mathematics said it was necessary. If I start questioning him now, I'm questioning whether their deaths had meaning. I can't do that. Not yet. On the Chimaera, Thrawn stood in his observation deck, analyzing intelligence reports that painted a clear picture. The Dominion was adapting faster than the Federation anticipated. The Breen alliance was accelerating. The founder defector, whether genuine or planted, would create chaos regardless of its true loyalties. And most critically, Starfleet was learning Thrawn's methods. They were becoming more pragmatic, more ruthless, more willing to sacrifice principles for victory. Exactly as planned. Commander Vanto entered cautiously. Admiral, you seem pleased. Pleased is inaccurate, Commander. Satisfied is more appropriate. Captain Sisko is learning that command requires impossible choices. He authorized Chintoka despite moral reservations. He's implementing blood screenings despite valuing trust. He's compromising Federation principles to preserve Federation survival. In another 6 months, he'll be indistinguishable from an Imperial commander. Is that the goal? To turn them into us? The goal is to ensure they survive, Commander. If that requires teaching them methods that violate their idealistic self-image, so be it. Better a pragmatic Federation that endures than a principled one that becomes extinct. Thrawn studied the star charts. However, there's a complication. The founder defector is genuine. Vanto's eyes widened. Sir. I've analyzed the intelligence it provided, tactical details, command structures, strategic planning. It's too accurate to be fabricated, too comprehensive to be limited disclosure. A genuine founder has defected from the Dominion, which means something has fractured within their collective. That's unprecedented. That's dangerous. Dangerous how? Because if one founder can develop independent ideology, others might as well. The Dominion's strength comes from unified purpose and genetic certainty. Philosophical fragmentation undermines both. The war might end not through military defeat but through internal ideological collapse. Thrawn's expression remained neutral, but something in his voice suggested calculation. An internal collapse creates opportunities for those positioned to exploit them. Vanto processed this. Admiral, are you positioning us to exploit Dominion weakness? I'm positioning us to survive, Commander. When this war ends, power structures will shift dramatically. The Federation may emerge dominant, or weakened, or fractured. The Klingon will demand territory. The Romulans will pursue strategic advantage. And the Chimaera and its crew will need a place in whatever new order emerges. I'm simply ensuring we have options. Far across the quadrant, on Earth, a founder sat in a detention cell designed to contain shapeshifters. Force fields hummed with energy calibrated to disrupt liquid forms. Sensors monitored every molecular fluctuation. Starfleet security personnel rotated every 4 hours, maintaining constant vigilance. The founder sat in humanoid form, male-presenting, middle-aged features, wearing standard-issue clothing. It had chosen this form carefully. Non-threatening. Sympathetic. Designed to encourage trust. An interrogator entered. I'm Commander Hildebrandt, Starfleet Intelligence. I have questions about the intelligence you've provided. The founder smiled. Ask anything. I've chosen transparency over deception. Why defect now? Why after Chintoka? Because Chintoka demonstrated something I'd begun to suspect, that solids possess strategic capabilities the founders underestimated. Your Grand Admiral Thrawn from another reality, his tactical analysis rivals anything the founders have produced. That suggested to me that perhaps solid life isn't inherently inferior. Perhaps the Great Link's certainty about our genetic superiority is flawed. So you're defecting based on strategic admiration? I'm defecting because continued observation of solid civilizations has created doubt. Doubt is impossible within the link. We share consciousness, share certainty, share purpose. Individual doubt dissolves into collective knowledge. But I've spent years among solids, maintaining infiltration positions, observing your cultures. The doubt accumulated until it could no longer be suppressed by the link's unity. So I left. I defected. I became what the founders fear most, an individual. Hildebrandt made notes. The founders' story was consistent with every previous interrogation. The intelligence it provided continued checking out. Psychological analysis suggested genuine philosophical conflict. But something about the situation felt wrong. Too convenient. Too perfectly aligned with Federation hopes. We'll continue monitoring you, Hildebrandt said finally. If you're genuine, you'll eventually prove it. If you're not, then I'm the most sophisticated infiltration operation in Dominion history, and your Federation is already compromised beyond recovery. Which possibility troubles you more, Commander? The founder's smile widened slightly. That's the beauty of my defection. Whether genuine or false, it creates the same strategic uncertainty. You must trust or imprison. Accept my intelligence or reject potential advantages. Either way, the Dominion wins simply by forcing you to choose. Hildebrandt left without responding. The founder returned to meditation, its humanoid form perfectly still, its thoughts, individual, isolated, unprecedented, considering possibilities that spanned decades. The Dominion War had entered a new phase. Not of battles or territory, but of infiltration and ideology. And the Federation was learning that some enemies couldn't be defeated with weapons. Some required compromising the very principles that made victory meaningful. Thrawn had predicted this evolution. He'd planned for it. And somewhere in his calculations, he'd already determined who would emerge victorious when principles and pragmatism finally destroyed each other. The Federation just didn't know it yet. The crisis came 6 weeks after the Founders' defection, during what Starfleet intelligence designated as Operation Pegasus, a coordinated Allied offensive against 3 Dominion strongholds simultaneously. The operation was textbook Thrawn, multivector attacks exploiting Dominion resource dispersion, leveraging Romulan cloaking technology, targeting logistics infrastructure rather than military assets. Every calculation suggested success. The Breen energy-dampening weapons changed everything. The USS Defiant dropped out of warp at the Avanal system, leading a task force of 23 Federation and Klingon vessels. Their target, a Dominion Ketracel White production facility supplying Jem'Hadar forces across 2 sectors. Destroy the facility, cripple the Jem'Hadar's combat effectiveness. Standard tactical doctrine. The Breen emerged from subspace 30 seconds after the Allied fleet's arrival. 7 Breen warships, their distinctive angular hulls bristling with weapons that no Federation sensor could properly analyze. They didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they emitted cascading energy pulses that washed across the Allied fleet like invisible waves. And every ship went dark. On the Defiance bridge, every console died simultaneously. The lights cut out. Life support stuttered. The hum of the warp core fell silent. In the space of 3 heartbeats, the most advanced warship in Starfleet's arsenal became a drifting hulk of inert metal. Emergency power. Sisko shouted into darkness. Chief, what just happened? O'Brien's voice came from engineering, thick with disbelief. Captain, everything's offline. Warp core, impulse engines, weapons, shields, even the backup batteries aren't responding. It's like every power system simultaneously forgot how to generate energy. This isn't damage, it's impossible. Through the Defiance viewports, the same scene repeated across the entire fleet. 23 starships floating dead in space, their engines cold, their weapons silent. Only the Klingon vessels maintained partial power, their redundant systems and less sophisticated technology proving resistant to whatever the Breen had deployed. The Breen warships advanced methodically, their conventional weapons now targeting the helpless Allied fleet. All hands, abandon ship. The order came from the USS Akagi, its captain recognizing the tactical reality. Escape pods began launching from multiple vessels as Breen weapons fire carved through unpowered shields. The USS Thunderchild exploded, its warp core breaching despite being offline, secondary plasma reactions turning the ship into an expanding debris field. 300 souls, dead in seconds. Sisko gripped his command chair, mind racing through impossible options. No power meant no weapons, no shields, no propulsion. They were targets. The Breen were executing them methodically, ship by ship. In approximately 90 seconds, the Defiant would be destroyed. Dax, can we restore anything? Anything at all? Working on it. Her voice remained steady despite the chaos. Emergency chemical lights activated, casting the bridge in eerie red glow. The Breen weapon created some kind of energy inversion field. Our power systems are trying to generate energy, but it's being converted into I don't know what. Exotic particles my sensors can't identify. Ben, I need at least 5 minutes to even understand what happened, let alone reverse it. They didn't have 5 minutes. A Klingon bird of prey, the IKS Coronar, surged forward on impulse power, positioning itself between the Defiant and the approaching Breen vessels. Its commander's voice crackled over emergency comm channels. Federation vessels, we will buy you time. Use it well. Kapla. The Coronar opened fire with everything remaining. Disruptors, photon torpedoes, even point defense phasers meant for small craft interception. Its attack was futile against 7 Breen warships, but it was glorious. The bird of prey died fighting, its hull torn apart by return fire, its crew singing Klingon battle hymns until the vacuum silenced them forever. Power restored. O'Brien's shout came from engineering. Emergency systems only, I can give you thrusters and maybe one phaser bank. The warp core's still dead, impulse is compromised, but we're not completely helpless. Helm, get us out of here, Sisko ordered. Best speed, any direction. All ships, retreat to the Calandra sector. We'll regroup in. Captain, Kira interrupted, her voice tight. The facility. The Ketracel White Production Center. It's still intact. We came here to destroy it. Sisko turned to see her standing at the dead tactical console, emergency power allowing minimal sensor function. She was right. The Dominion facility floated 300,000 kilometers away, its defensive platform still active, its production continuing uninterrupted. 23 ships had entered this system. 7 remained functional, all Klingon, all operating at reduced capacity. 16 Federation vessels were either destroyed or drifting powerless. And the mission was a complete failure. Tactical retreat, Sisko said, the words like poison. We can't complete the objective without power. All remaining vessels, withdraw to. A new contact appeared on sensors. A massive, wedge-shaped vessel dropping out of hyperspace with the characteristic energy signature that had become familiar over the past 2 months. The Chimaera. Thrawn's voice came over emergency channels, calm and analytical. Captain Sisko, I've monitored your engagement. The Breen energy weapons exploit a vulnerability in your power generation systems. Matter/antimatter reactions generate exotic particles that the weapons amplify, creating cascade failures. Crude but effective. However, the Chimaera's reactor operates on different principles. We remain functional. Grand Admiral, Sisko said, relief and suspicion warring in his tone. What are you doing here? This operation was classified. I predicted the Breen would deploy their weapons in exactly this scenario, a mid-level offensive where the psychological impact would be maximized without risking total fleet destruction. I positioned the Chimaera in adjacent systems to provide support when the inevitable occurred. Now, do you want tactical analysis, or shall I proceed with destroying the Breen vessels while you debate my presence? Through the viewports, the Chimaera rotated ponderously on damaged maneuvering thrusters that had never been fully repaired. Its turbolaser batteries, those devastating weapons that had proven so effective at Deep Space Nine, blazed to life with emerald fire. 7 Breen warships turned to face this new threat. They deployed their energy-dampening weapons, washing the Chimaera with the same cascading pulses that had crippled the Allied fleet. Nothing happened. Thrawn's reactor technology, designed for a completely different universe, operating on principles incompatible with Star Trek physics, simply ignored the Breen weapons. The energy inversions that devastated matter/antimatter reactions had no effect on Imperial power systems. The Chimaera fired. The first Breen warship exploded as a turbolaser carved through its central hull. The coherent energy beam simply vaporized armor that had been designed to resist phasers and disruptors. The second Breen ship tried to evade, its pilot recognizing that conventional tactics were irrelevant. The turbolaser tracked its movement with mechanical precision, intersecting the vessel's engine section at the moment it attempted to jump to warp. The resulting explosion was visible from orbit. 5 remaining Breen warships scattered, suddenly facing an enemy their superweapon couldn't neutralize. They fired conventional weapons, polaron beams, plasma torpedoes, kinetic projectiles. The Chimaera's shields, also incompatible with local physics, absorbed the barrage. Damaged sections of the Star Destroyer's hull took hits, armor plating vaporizing, atmosphere venting from sealed compartments. But the ship continued firing. 3 more Breen vessels destroyed in rapid succession. The final 2 retreated, jumping to warp before Thrawn's gunners could target them. In less than 3 minutes, the Breen ambush had been shattered by a single warship from another reality operating with technology the Dominion had never encountered. Breen vessels retreating, Thrawn reported with the same clinical calm he'd maintained throughout. Captain Sisko, I recommend your remaining Klingon vessels assault the Ketracel-White facility while the Dominion is disorganized. The Chimaera will provide covering fire. Your Federation ships should begin emergency power restoration. Chief O'Brien's expertise will be essential in developing countermeasures to the Breen weapons before the next engagement. Sisko should have felt relief. Gratitude. They'd been facing total annihilation, and Thrawn had saved them. But something about the situation felt orchestrated. Too convenient. Too perfectly timed. All Klingon vessels, assault the facility, Sisko ordered, pushing suspicion aside. Survival first. Questions later. Grand Admiral, provide fire support. Chief, start analyzing what the Breen weapons did to our systems. I want countermeasures developed yesterday. The Klingon birds of prey surged forward, their surviving crews roaring battle cries as they struck the now vulnerable Dominion facility. The Chimaera's turbolasers eliminated defensive platforms with surgical precision. Within 10 minutes, the Ketracel-White production center was destroyed, its supplies vented into space, its personnel dead or captured. Operation Pegasus, a catastrophic failure that had cost 16 Federation star ships, had become a marginal success only because of Thrawn's intervention. As the surviving fleet limped back toward Federation space, Sisko sat in the Defiant's darkened bridge, emergency power barely maintaining life support. Around him, his crew worked to restore systems that had been compromised in ways they didn't understand. Outside, the Chimaera maintained escort position, its massive bulk a reminder that their survival had depended on technology that shouldn't exist in their universe. Captain, Dax said quietly, moving to sit beside him. We need to talk about what just happened. Thrawn saved us. I know. That's not what concerns me. Ben, how did he know to be there? Operation Pegasus was classified at the highest levels. The Breen shouldn't have known our target, and Thrawn shouldn't have known to position himself in adjacent systems. Unless he's receiving intelligence we're not aware of. Or providing it to someone else. Sisko's jaw tightened. I'm aware of the implications, old man. But right now, I'm more concerned with the fact that 16 starships and 4,000 crew members are dead or missing because the Breen have a weapon we can't counter. Thrawn's loyalties are a problem for tomorrow. Today, I need him. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we figure out whether we've been working with a strategic genius or a strategic saboteur. Tomorrow we confront the possibility that every battle we've won under his advice has been leading to something we haven't anticipated. Tomorrow we decide whether the Federation can survive without compromising everything that makes us the Federation. Sisko stood, exhaustion evident in every movement. But today, we mourn our dead and prepare for the next engagement. Because the war doesn't stop while we debate philosophy. On the Chimaera, Thrawn reviewed the battle's aftermath with Commander Vanto. Casualty reports, tactical analysis, strategic implications. All processed with the same analytical detachment he'd shown since arriving in this universe. Admiral, we've expended 43% of our remaining turbolaser charge capacity, Vanto reported. If we continue combat operations at this intensity, we'll be defenseless within 2 months. The Federation still hasn't provided the resources necessary for full reactor repair. They haven't provided those resources because they don't fully trust us, Commander. Today's intervention will change that calculation. Captain Sisko now understands that the Chimaera represents their only effective counter to Breen weapons. He'll authorize whatever resources we need to maintain operational capacity because we've become strategically indispensable. That was the goal. To make ourselves necessary. Survival requires being valued, Commander. The Romulans attempted recruitment and failed. The Federation accepted us provisionally and maintained suspicion. The Breen attack provided an opportunity to demonstrate that we're not merely useful, we're irreplaceable. Now, when I recommend tactics, Captain Sisko will listen not out of courtesy but out of necessity. That's how influence becomes power. Vanto was silent for a moment. Sir, the Dominion War will end eventually. What happens to us when it does? When we're no longer strategically necessary? Thrawn turned from the tactical display to face his second-in-command directly. An excellent question, Commander. The answer depends on what we build during the war. Relationships. Obligations. Dependencies. By the time this conflict concludes, the Federation will have integrated Imperial tactical doctrine, technology, and strategic philosophy into their military structure. They'll have commanders who think like I taught them to think. They'll have weapons systems derived from our technology. They'll have ethical compromises they made because I showed them the mathematics of survival. You're reshaping the Federation. I'm ensuring we have a place in it, Commander. When the war ends, the Chimaera and its crew will be too valuable to dismiss, too integrated to remove, too necessary to reject. We'll have survived not by conquering this universe but by making it need us. That's how you build an empire that endures, not through force, but through indispensability. Far away, on Earth, the defector founder sat in its cell, monitoring reports of the Breen attack through information its guards inadvertently revealed. The energy weapons. The Federation casualties. Thrawn's intervention. All data points and calculations that span time frames Solid struggled to comprehend. The founder smiled, an expression it had learned from observing humanoids for years. Everything was proceeding as the founders had predicted. The Federation was learning to fight like the Dominion. They were compromising principles. They were becoming dependent on an advisor whose ultimate loyalties remained unknown. They were fracturing from within while believing they were growing stronger. Whether the defection was genuine or fabricated no longer mattered. The effect was identical: strategic uncertainty, philosophical corruption, gradual transformation into the very authoritarianism they opposed. The Dominion War would be won not through military conquest but through patient demonstration that Solids inevitably became what they fought against. That order always triumphed over chaos. That the Founders' vision was inevitable. And in the center of it all, Grand Admiral Thrawn, the catalyst who'd arrived from another reality and taught the Federation how to win by teaching them how to lose themselves. The endgame was approaching. All pieces were positioned. The final moves would determine whether the Federation survived intact, transformed, or destroyed by the very tactics that had kept them alive. Thrawn knew which outcome he'd calculated as most probable. The Federation didn't. Not yet. The confrontation came 3 months after the Breen debacle, in Deep Space Nine's wardroom at 0200 hours. Sisko had called the meeting with no advance notice, just a priority summons to his senior staff and one Imperial Grand Admiral whose strategic advice had become simultaneously indispensable and insufferable. Thrawn arrived precisely on time, his white uniform immaculate as always, his red eyes scanning the room with characteristic analytical precision. Sisko, Kira, Dax, O'Brien, and Odo waited in silence. No one sat. This wasn't that kind of meeting. Captain, Thrawn acknowledged with a slight nod. Your summons suggested urgency. Has the Dominion launched another offensive? No, Sisko said flatly. But we've discovered something interesting. Commander Karras, the Romulan Tal Shiar operative who tried to recruit you, was found dead 3 days ago. Poisoned with a compound that traces back to Imperial chemical weapons. Your chemical weapons, Grand Admiral. Thrawn's expression didn't change. Fascinating. And you assume I'm responsible? The Romulans certainly do. They're claiming you eliminated her because she discovered something about your true agenda. They've demanded you be handed over for interrogation. The Klingon are suspicious. Even Starfleet Command is asking uncomfortable questions about our blue-skinned advisor from another reality. Sisko stepped closer. So I'm asking you directly, Grand Admiral. Did you kill Commander Kara's? No, Captain. I did not. Thrawn's tone remained utterly calm. However, I understand why you'd suspect me. Commander Kara's was investigating my background, my technology, my strategic recommendations. She was intelligent, thorough, and deeply paranoid, exactly the qualities that make effective intelligence operatives. If I were planning deception, she would have been a threat worth eliminating. That's not a denial that's filling me with confidence, Kira said sharply. It's an acknowledgement of tactical reality, Major. But consider the logic. If I wanted Commander Kara's dead, would I use a poison that traces directly to Imperial weaponry? Would I eliminate her in a manner that immediately focuses suspicion on me? That's strategically incompetent. I don't do strategically incompetent. Dax pulled up analysis on a datapad. He's right, Captain. The poison used was listed in Imperial chemical databases we've been cataloging from the Chimaera's records. But it's also crude, a compound that any competent chemist could synthesize if they had the molecular formula. Using it creates a false trail pointing to Thrawn. So you're saying someone framed him? O'Brien asked skeptically. Who? The Dominion? Or the Romulans themselves, Thrawn suggested. Commander Kara's death serves multiple Romulan objectives. It casts suspicion on me, potentially removing an advisor who's made the Federation more tactically effective. It justifies increased Romulan intelligence operations under the guise of investigating my crimes. And most significantly, it tests Federation loyalty. Will you defend me, or sacrifice me to maintain alliance cohesion? Your choice reveals how much you trust me versus how much you need Romulan cooperation. Sisko felt the trap closing. Thrawn was right, this was political maneuvering disguised as investigation. And they were forcing him to choose sides without complete information. So your position is you're being framed? My position is I'm being tested, Captain. By the Romulans, certainly. Possibly by elements within Starfleet who've grown uncomfortable with my influence. Perhaps even by the Dominion, exploiting existing tensions to fracture the alliance. Thrawn pulled up his own tactical display. However, I'm less concerned with who killed Commander Kara's than with why they chose this particular moment. The Dominion is preparing something significant. My analysis suggests they're consolidating forces in the Gamma Quadrant for a final major offensive. If the Alliance is busy investigating internal betrayals, we won't be prepared for external threats. Convenient timing for that analysis, Odo observed. Distract us from suspecting you by warning about bigger dangers. Constable, if I wanted to distract you, I'd have provided specific intelligence about an imminent attack, forcing immediate action that precluded further investigation. Instead, I'm offering strategic assessment and allowing you to conduct whatever investigation you deem necessary. Search the Chimaera. Interrogate my crew. Analyze every communication I've sent in the past 6 months. You'll find nothing connecting me to Commander Kara's death because I had nothing to do with it. Sisko studied the Grand Admiral's face. Those alien red eyes met his without flinching, without the micro-expressions that indicated deception. But Thrawn had decades of experience controlling his reactions. He was from a galaxy where political survival required perfect composure under Imperial scrutiny. Odo, conduct the investigation, Sisko decided. Full access to Thrawn and his ship. If you find evidence of involvement, we'll turn him over to the appropriate authorities. If you don't, we clear him publicly and move on. Grand Admiral, you'll cooperate fully? Of course, Captain. I have nothing to hide. Thrawn's tone suggested amusement. Though I predict your investigation will reveal something more uncomfortable than my involvement, evidence that multiple parties are attempting to manipulate the Federation through carefully orchestrated crises. The question is whether you're prepared to acknowledge that possibility. Over the next 72 hours, Odo's investigation consumed Deep Space Nine's resources. Security teams combed through the Chimaera's databases. Chemical analysis confirmed that Imperial compounds could be synthesized from publicly available materials. Communication logs showed no contact between Thrawn and anyone in Romulan space. Crew interviews revealed nothing suspicious. But Odo discovered something else. The defector founder on Earth, the changeling who'd claimed philosophical disagreement with Dominion policy, had transmitted 17 coded messages to unknown recipients before Starfleet detected the breach. Those messages had been routed through communication relays that included Deep Space Nine systems. One transmission had occurred 6 hours before Commander Kara's death. Odo presented his findings in Sisko's office, his changeling features more rigid than usual. "Captain, we've been looking at the wrong conspiracy. Kara's wasn't investigating Thrawn, she was investigating the defector founder. Her last intelligence report, sent to Romulan High Command 3 days before her death, suggested the founder's defection was genuine but tactically dangerous. She believed it was providing accurate intelligence specifically to gain trust for future deception. And you think the founder killed her to prevent that report from being acted on?" Sisko asked. "I think the founder is playing a game we don't fully understand. It provides genuine intelligence that helps the Federation, which builds trust. Simultaneously, it sends coded messages we can't decrypt to recipients we can't identify. It creates suspicion around Thrawn, forcing internal alliance conflicts. And it does all of this while claiming to have rejected founder philosophy." Odo's voice hardened. "Captain, I'm changeling. I understand how my people think. This defection isn't about ideology, it's about infiltration at the most sophisticated level imaginable." Dax pulled up communication analysis. "If the founder is sending coded messages, it's not acting as a defector, it's acting as a deep cover operative. But operating toward what objective? Every piece of intelligence it's provided has been accurate. We've won battles based on that information." "Have we?" Thrawn's voice came from the doorway. He'd arrived unannounced, apparently monitoring the investigation's progress. "Or have we won battles the Dominion was willing to lose in order to position us for a larger trap? Consider the pattern: I arrive, providing tactical advice that makes the Federation more aggressive. The founder defects, providing intelligence that validates aggressive action. Together, we've transformed Starfleet from a defensive force into an offensive military conducting deep strikes into enemy territory. Casualties are mounting. Resources are depleting. And most significantly, the Federation's diplomatic reputation is suffering as neutral powers observe your increasingly ruthless tactics." "You're saying we're being manipulated," Sisko said slowly. "Both by you and the founder." "I'm saying you're being positioned, Captain. Whether that positioning serves your interests or the Dominion's depends on understanding the endgame." Thrawn entered fully, moving to the tactical display. "The Founder's messages were sent to Dominion territory, my analysis confirms that. But Constable Odo is correct that the intelligence it provides is genuine. This apparent contradiction suggests the Founder is executing a long-term strategy where truth serves deception. And I suspect I know what that strategy is." "Enlighten us," Kira said coldly. "The Dominion is losing the military conflict. Your aggressive tactics, many of which I recommended, have crippled their shipbuilding capacity, disrupted their supply lines, and fractured their territorial control. They can't win through conventional warfare. So they're pursuing victory through corruption. They're demonstrating that even the idealistic Federation becomes authoritarian when survival demands it. That you'll compromise principles, conduct preemptive strikes, sacrifice thousands for strategic advantage. The defector founder provides intelligence that helps you win battles while helping the Dominion win the ideological war." Silence filled the office. Sisko felt pieces clicking into place, uncomfortable, damning pieces. Every victory since Chintoka had come with ethical costs. Every tactical success had required compromising Federation values. They'd won battles while losing the moral high ground that made the Federation worth defending. And your role in this? Sisko demanded. Have you been guiding us toward this outcome? Thrawn was silent for precisely 5 seconds, longer than any previous pause. When he spoke, something almost like genuine emotion entered his voice. Captain, I serve no one's agenda but survival. The empire I served is galaxies away, unreachable. The crew members depending on me need a future in this universe. I've taught you tactics that work because tactics that don't work result in my crew's extermination when you no longer need us. If that's made you more ruthless, more pragmatic, more willing to compromise ideals for victory, yes, I accept responsibility. But I didn't force those choices. You made them. Every authorization, every strike, every casualty was your decision. I simply showed you what was necessary. You manipulated us, Kira accused. I educated you, Major. There's a difference. The Dominion threatens billions. I taught you how to fight an enemy that doesn't share your ethics. If that education comes with costs, those are the costs of survival. Thrawn turned to Odo. Constable, I recommend you inform Starfleet Command that their defector founder is a sophisticated long-term infiltrator. The intelligence it provides should still be used, it's accurate and valuable. But trust nothing it says about founder psychology or Dominion intentions. Its true objective isn't providing military intelligence but demonstrating that the Federation inevitably becomes what it fights. And what about you? Sisko asked quietly. What's your true objective, Grand Admiral? To ensure my crew survives. To position the Chimaera as indispensable to Federation security. To integrate Imperial knowledge and technology into your civilization so thoroughly that when this war ends, you'll need us permanently. That's not deception, Captain, that's pragmatic self-interest. I've been transparent about it from the beginning. Thrawn met Sisko's gaze directly. The question isn't whether I've manipulated you. The question is whether what I've taught you will survive once you no longer need my advice. Will you return to pure Federation idealism? Or will you remain the more pragmatic, more ruthless military force this war has required you to become? Before Sisko could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red alert klaxons, emergency battle stations, priority communications from Starfleet Command. Dax rushed to the nearest console, her expression going pale as she processed incoming data. Captain, it's the Dominion. They're launching the offensive Thrawn predicted. 30 sectors simultaneously. Breen forces are hitting Earth's orbital defenses. Jem'Hadar fleets are pushing toward Vulcan, Andoria, and Tellar Prime. Cardassian forces are striking Klingon border worlds. They're attempting to overwhelm the entire alliance simultaneously. Sisko felt ice in his veins. This was it. The endgame. Everything they'd fought for, every compromise they'd made, every principle they'd sacrificed, all leading to this moment where the Dominion would attempt to end the war in one catastrophic offensive. All senior staff to ops, Sisko ordered. Contact every available ship. This is fleet mobilization, everyone, everywhere. Grand Admiral, he turned to Thrawn. I don't trust you. I don't know if you've been helping us or positioning us for failure. But right now, I need your tactical analysis. Earth is under attack. Will you help us defend it? Thrawn's expression remained neutral, analytical, but something in his red eyes suggested this was the question he'd been anticipating for months. Captain, I've spent my entire career defending civilizations from existential threats. The empire I served, for all its flaws, represented order against chaos. Earth represents a similar principle, imperfect democracy struggling against authoritarian tyranny. Yes, I'll help you defend it. Not because I've suddenly developed Federation idealism, but because I recognize which side represents civilization's best probability of survival. That's not exactly a rousing endorsement of our values. Captain, you don't need me to validate your values. You need me to help you survive so your values can endure. There's a difference. Thrawn activated his command datapad. I'll coordinate with the Chimaera's tactical staff and provide comprehensive defensive strategies. But understand, this offensive is designed to force impossible choices. You cannot defend 30 sectors with available forces. You will have to sacrifice some worlds to save others. You will have to make exactly the kind of pragmatic, ruthless decisions the Dominion wants to prove you're capable of making. The question is whether you'll make those decisions and still remain the Federation afterward. Sisko looked at his senior staff, Kira, determined despite moral exhaustion, Dax, analytical but concerned. O'Brien, pragmatic and ready, Odo, conflicted but loyal. They'd fought for 3 years, compromising piece by piece, victory by victory, until the idealistic organization they joined had become something harder, sharper, more willing to kill. We'll make the necessary decisions, Sisko said quietly. And we'll live with the consequences. That's what command means. But Grand Admiral, when this war ends, if we survive, we're having a much longer conversation about your methods and your place in the Federation. Clear. Perfectly clear, Captain. Now, shall we save Earth? I believe that's traditionally considered important. As they moved to ops, coordinating defensive strategies across 30 sectors, managing impossible resource allocations, authorizing strikes that would kill millions to save billions, Sisko understood with crystal clarity what Thrawn had accomplished. The Grand Admiral hadn't conquered the Federation. He'd educated it. Transformed it. Taught it to think strategically rather than idealistically. Made it more effective, more dangerous, more capable of survival. And whether that transformation represented salvation or corruption would only be clear when the war finally ended and they were forced to confront what they'd become. Outside, the stars burned with the fires of simultaneous battles. 30 sectors. Billions of lives. The largest military engagement in Alpha Quadrant history. And at the center of it all, a human captain, an alien advisor, and an infiltrator founder whose true loyalties remained unknown, struggling to preserve a civilization that had learned to win by learning to compromise everything that made it worth saving. The Dominion War's final chapter had begun. And the Federation's greatest test wasn't surviving the battle. It was surviving the victory. The war ended 14 months later, not with a single decisive battle but with gradual collapse of Dominion logistics and political will. The simultaneous offensive, despite its initial devastation, had overextended Dominion resources beyond sustainable limits. The Federation, Klingon, and Romulans held. Barely. At costs measured in millions of casualties and dozens of occupied worlds. But they held. When the founders finally agreed to negotiations, it was Odo who crossed into the Gamma Quadrant to persuade the Great Link. The changeling who'd chosen solid justice over genetic unity somehow convinced his people that continued war meant extinction. The shapeshifters who believed they were gods learned they were mortal. The defector founder was executed by Starfleet intelligence after its coded transmissions were finally decrypted. Not intelligence for the Dominion, but philosophical arguments attempting to convince the Great Link that solids could be trusted. A long-term infiltrator working not for military victory but for ideological transformation. Its death remained classified. Its intentions remained debated. Grand Admiral Thrawn received commendations from 3 governments and suspicion from all of them. The Chimaera was granted permanent berth at Deep Space Nine, its crew integrated into Federation society as a unique cultural entity, neither Starfleet nor civilian, existing in strategic gray zones Thrawn had carefully cultivated. Captain Benjamin Sisko stood on DS9's promenade 6 months after the Treaty of Bajorans, watching Thrawn examine a newly installed Bajoran artwork. The Grand Admiral studied the piece with his characteristic analytical intensity. Searching for psychological insights, strategic implications, cultural meanings that others missed. It depicts the prophets welcoming home the emissary, Sisko said quietly. The Bajoran people believe I fulfilled prophecy by helping end the war. And you believe you compromised every principle you held to achieve that outcome, Thrawn replied without looking away from the artwork. Captain, you've been avoiding me since the treaty signing. Guilt? Resentment? Or simply uncomfortable recognition that the commander you've become isn't the idealist who authorized my presence on this station? All of the above, Grand Admiral. Sisko moved closer. 15,000 casualties. Preemptive strikes. Abandoned colonies we couldn't defend. Ethical compromises that will haunt me until I die. You taught me how to win by teaching me how to sacrifice principles for survival. Was it worth it? Thrawn finally turned to face him. You're asking the wrong question, Captain. The question isn't whether survival was worth the cost. The question is what you'll do with the civilization you've preserved. Will you rebuild Federation idealism? Return to diplomatic solutions and ethical warfare? Or will you maintain the pragmatic military force this war required? That choice defines whether everything you sacrificed had meaning. You're not going to tell me which path is correct? Because there isn't a correct path. Only choices and consequences. Something almost like respect entered Thrawn's voice. Captain, I've served emperors and admirals who believed they knew absolute truth. They're all dead now, their empires collapsed or transformed beyond recognition. You've survived because you questioned every decision while still making them. That's not weakness, that's the strength required for civilization to endure. Sisko was silent, processing words from someone he'd never fully trusted but couldn't ignore. The Federation Council wants to make you an official strategic advisor. Permanent position, full security clearance, influence over military doctrine. They're terrified of you, but they recognize what you've accomplished. What should I tell them? Tell them I accept on one condition, that the Federation never stops questioning my recommendations. The moment you start trusting me completely is the moment I've become dangerous. Thrawn's red eyes gleamed. I'm a tactical genius from an authoritarian empire, Captain. Use my knowledge. Benefit from my expertise. But never forget that my perspective is fundamentally alien to your democratic ideals. The tension between my pragmatism and your principles is what kept you from becoming the Dominion. Maintain that tension. You're saying we need you to stay suspicious of you. I'm saying civilizations survive through balanced contradictions. Pure idealism is naive. Pure pragmatism is tyranny. You need both, constantly challenging each other. I provide pragmatism. You provide idealism. Together, we created something neither of us could achieve alone. A federation strong enough to survive without becoming what it fought against. Sisko extended his hand. Then welcome to the Federation, Grand Admiral. Officially and permanently. Though I'm warning you now, every decision you recommend will be scrutinized, debated, and probably modified by committees who think they know better than you. Thrawn accepted the handshake, that slight controlled smile appearing. Captain, I've dealt with Imperial bureaucracy, Rebel alliance politics, and Grand Moff territorial disputes. Federation committee oversight sounds remarkably familiar. I'll adapt. As Thrawn departed, returning to the Chimaera where 6,000 Imperial crew members had built lives in a universe not their own, Sisko returned to the Bajoran artwork. The prophets welcoming home the emissary. Prophecy fulfilled. Peace achieved. At costs measured not just in casualties, but in principles compromised, idealism tempered by necessity, and the uncomfortable recognition that sometimes the monsters you defeat change you more than victory ever could. Grand Admiral Thrawn had entered the Star Trek universe as a strategic advisor. He'd become something more complex, a catalyst forcing the Federation to evolve or perish. Whether that evolution represented strength or corruption remained an open question. But the Federation survived. And in a universe where existential threats emerged constantly, survival meant having the wisdom to learn from anyone. Even brilliant tacticians from dead empires who saw civilization as mathematical probability rather than moral imperative. The Dominion War was over. The debate about what the Federation had become to win it would continue for generations. And somewhere on a damaged Star Destroyer orbiting a Bajoran space station, an alien admiral studied artwork and calculated probabilities for conflicts yet to emerge. Because war never truly ends. It only changes form. And those who understand that survive to face the next crisis. Whether they remain recognizable afterward is another question entirely. Live long and prosper. More stories await.